We'll get the meeting started. All right, thank you. Ms. Kitchen, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Hawes,
Here.
Mr. Lovell,
Here.
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Wagle,
Here.
Ms. Cage,
Here.
Mr. Whitty,
Here.
Mr. Bro,
Here.
Mr. Reese,
Here.
Mr. Broussard, Mr. Wyatt,
Here.
Ms. Gotro, Mr. Burke,
I'm here this place.
Ms. Garman, Mr. Helmers, Mr. Bourgeois,
Here.
Mr. Hidalgo, Ms. Cormier,
Here.
Mr. Segrera,
Here.
Mr. Lane.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Kitchen, and I have it on good authority that Ms. Gotro is stuck behind a wreck, but on her way, so she hopefully will be here shortly. We'll go to agenda item number 3, members, and approval of the minutes. I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Bourgeois, second by Mr. Lovell. Any public comment? Any objection to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Ms. Cormier, second by Mr. Bro. Any public comments on that motion? Any objection? All right, hearing none, that motion carries. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, old business. First and foremost, I'd like to just take an opportunity to thank the community of Abbeville. It's good, as always, for this board that comes from folks from all over the coast, but it's good to get out of Baton Rouge. It's nice to be in Abbeville. It's been a while. One of the jewels of Louisiana's coast, and again, it's good to be in one of the communities directly along our coast that is directly impacted by the work that CPRA does. So we're happy to be here. I want to welcome Lee from Senator Cassidy's office. I want to thank her for being here, and Sarah from Senator Kennedy's office as well. And would like to offer the mayor an opportunity to say a few words. Mayor White? Oh, it does.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to take an opportunity to welcome you all to our beautiful historic downtown Abbeville, which is right across the bridge. Thank you for having this meeting in our community. I grew up in Intracoastal City and in Henry, which, as you know, are right on the front lines of the coast down here. Not only are we the center of the state, but the Vermilion River dissects our city. So everything that this board does affects our community greatly. And so thank you for the work that you do. Keep in mind this space whenever there's projects for Central Louisiana, because everything you do affects me, my family, and all the business and people who choose to live here. So thank you for the work. I invite you all to stay after. If you didn't know, Abbeville is known for our seafood restaurants. So there are 3 seafood restaurants within a 3-minute drive of here that you can get the best meal you probably ever had. So please stay and leave a little money in our community after this meeting. Have a great day, and I hope you do good work here.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We appreciate that. Based on my conversations earlier this week and earlier today, I think the restaurants will do well today. So happy to report that. Any other old business from members of the board? Any announcements or remarks? Okay, hearing none, I did want to make one note myself related to the schedule of upcoming meetings. As you all know, the legislative sessions every other year start at different times of the year. And because we're producing either a master plan every 6 years and an annual plan, of course, every year, and there's some prescribed times within which we have to get that to the legislature, have public comment, conduct our public meetings, and so forth. It affects when we're presenting the annual plan, in this case, at our meetings. So because the session in next year starts relatively early, we are going to need to present an annual plan to this board at the December meeting. The third Wednesday of the December meeting would be, December 20th, which is awfully close to Christmas. And so we're going to suggest and move that meeting up to the 13th. The meetings for January and February will be on the third Wednesday, as they typically are. And then in March, again, to try to meet our prescribed timelines for getting an annual plan presented to you all, and for us to have time, for CPRA to have time to incorporate public comment. That meeting will be on the 13th as well in March. So just note, please, that we are in the thick. I know it's a little earlier than it was last year, but we are in the thick of developing the annual plan for FY25. I know seems like we just finished FY24, but such is the cycle that we operate under. But just please note, the December meeting will be on the 13th, and the March meeting will be on March 13th as well. Any other comments or questions before I move on? All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 6. I'd like to invite Greg Grandy up to provide the implementation update. Mr. Grandy?
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It's my pleasure to give an implementation update for October for CPRA. The big board here of active projects, we've got 44 projects in construction, 6 in engineering and design, and 3 in planning. 45 of them, or 44 of them, as I noted, are in construction. Marsh Creation leads the way in engineering and design with 26 projects. I'll note that there are 3 new projects this month that move to construction. A couple of projects that move into construction include the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion and the La Branch Shoreline Protection projects. 2 other projects of local interest, one in Cameron Parish, the Gulf Shoreline Protection Project that's adjacent to the Rockefeller Refuge. That project the contract was awarded, and we anticipate construction to begin soon on that. And then in Vermilion Parish, scheduled to be advertised next month, the North Vermilion Bay Shoreline Project. The project number on that is TV77. It includes some parish funds as well as surplus and GOMESA funds from the state of Louisiana. So we hope to have updates on both of those projects very soon. So the next project, the first project I'll present in detail is the Long Point Bayou Marsh Creation Project. It's located west of the Calcasieu Ship Channel between the Gulf of Mexico and Lake Charles. The project's adjacent to an area where more than 155 miles of shoreline were damaged by a 2006 oil spill from the Citgo Lake Charles manufacturing complex located north of the site. The spill released an estimated 2.7 million gallons of oil and oily water into the Indian Marais waterway, which then flowed into the Calcasieu River and adjacent estuary. The project's a collaboration among the Natural Resources Trustees Group, which includes the Louisiana Oil Spill Coordinator's Office, Louisiana DEQ, Louisiana DNR, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, CPRA, the Corps of Engineers, and EPA. The design phase of the project was funded through the QUIPRA program, and the Natural Resource Trustees are funding construction of the project as part of the 2006 Citgo Calcasieu River case settlement. So this is a little bit of video. So you'll have a March 2023 and then a September 2023 look at this area. And it gives you a great perspective that highlights the 2 primary features. Here you can see the containment dikes that are being constructed as the early phase of the project. A little bit later you'll see the September 2023 video that shows material being pumped into the project. The project's being constructed by the Corps of Engineers. They're using sediment that they're dredging from the Calcasieu Ship Channel, and that maintenance dredging is being beneficially used to construct the project. So you can see as we're moving into the cell to the upper left of the video, the containment dike holding the sediment in this area. This is an overhead shot of where the discharge pipe is coming into the site, discharging sediment. You can see some of the sediment that's been built up in that area. If not used for marsh creation, the dredge material would have had to been disposed of at an upland disposal site. So it kind of does 2 benefits. Number 1, you're using the material beneficially, plus that upland disposal site, in case it needs to be used in the future, will be available. So just a few other good photographs from the drone of the project construction. In late 2023, we anticipate this project to be completed in a not too distant future. It's the dredge working in the ship channel and the discharge pipe. So the The contractors that are working on this project, Mike Hooks is the dredging contractor. They're based out of Calcasieu Parish. Morrison Surveying and Dean Equipment. Dean was doing the containment dikes, as well as Finstermaker was doing the supervision and inspection of construction. From an engineering and design standpoint, Intertech PSI did the geotech, Independent Land Services and Oil Land Services did the land rights, Finstermaker did the surveying, CE Hydro and R. Christopher Goodwin and Associates did the cultural resources, and INCOST helped with both the cultural resources and the collection of vibrocores on this project. The next project that I'll highlight is the Henderson Lake Water Management Spoil Gapping Project. This is a project that's located in St. Martin and St. Landry parishes in the Atchafalaya Basin. It's the first hydrologic restoration project to be completed by the Atchafalaya Basin program since the program was transferred from DNR to CPRA in 2018. The project was 100% funded with capital outlay funding. Let me go back to the previous map. On this map, let's see if that'll work. You probably can't see it real well. There are a few along the Dixie pipeline. There are containment dikes that were there when the pipeline was originally constructed. There's a few green dots and red dots on that pipeline. And as we kind of follow the boat that's going down the pipeline, we'll come across a piece of equipment that's gapping on both sides of the pipeline to allow water to flow from the north to the south. The project will improve restricted water flows north of Henderson Lake that contributes to poor water quality in the swamps and the lakes. The contractor just finished constructing 25 alternating north and south gaps and elevated spoil banks along the pipeline to restore that natural north to south sheet flow through Henderson Lake. The gaps were strategically located to reconnect to historic bayous, and we'll take a little bit of a look at a long arm excavator kind of excavating through that channel. This is not rocket science, but it's extraordinary work. You can see a few of the gaps that have been built that allows that water to flow through these areas. This is a project, and now you can see them working on the south side of the Dixie pipeline. It's a project that has, and you can see the connection between the north and south gaps as well. Project that had significant support from parties in the Atchafalaya Basin, and we're happy to see this project completed. The contractors on this, C.H. Finstermaker and Associates, assisted with the engineering, design, and oversight. U.S. Aqua Services, based out of New Iberia, was the primary contractor. Hydroterra Technologies assisted with surveying, and RES helped with planting on the project. So as we look forward, we've got a busy fourth quarter with a number of meetings. We do have fall community conversations that are scheduled for later this month. So next Monday we'll be in Covington, and then next Thursday we'll be in Cutoff, Louisiana. These are intended to be informal dialogues with the community where we'll highlight projects that are going on in those particular areas. We'll identify some of the regional challenges and master plan projects from the 2023 master plan, but it's not a master plan meeting. It's to provide an opportunity to folks to understand projects that are going on. So we'll highlight some high-profile projects, but also have tables where folks can sit and have a conversation with folks from CPRA and provide input to work that's going on. As we look at the calendar and move forward into October, yesterday we had an Atchafalaya Basin program meeting in Breaux Bridge. Tomorrow we've got a Atchafalaya Basin program FY 2025 draft annual plan program meetings scheduled in Plaquemines. If you need details on those, you can see someone in the audience. I know Mr. Brian Lazina is right behind me, and those meetings will be going on kind of yesterday and tomorrow. There are a number of volunteer opportunities that are shown on the calendar for our friends at the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana this Friday and Saturday, and then Saturday, November the 4th. Next Wednesday, the 25th, there'll be a Governor's Advisory Committee meeting in Baton Rouge. There's a Quickboro Regional Stakeholder meeting on the 24th, and then on the 23rd, you can see the the community conversation meeting that's scheduled over on the North Shore. As we look to November, another volunteer, that's the volunteer opportunity with the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. The community conversation, November the 9th. Our friends at the BITNEP have their fourth quarter management conference on the 10th. And then a few other volunteer opportunities, Restore Retreat on the 12th, and then CRCL again on the 17th and the 21st.
Greg, if I could interrupt you, as I was mentioning kind of our modified schedule coming up in December, and I mentioned March, I should have mentioned that we will not hold a board meeting in November. Typically, either November or December, we'll take that month off, and so we will be taking November off. No board meeting then. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as we look to December, the 13th is that'll be the board meeting that Bren mentioned earlier. That will be in Baton Rouge. We do have a Carnarvon and Davis Pond Advisory Committee meetings in New Orleans on December the 7th, and then a CPRA technical meeting on December the 14th, and a few other volunteer events. You can go to crcl.org to schedule those volunteer events. Later today, the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group will have their annual update. It's going to be a virtual update. It will be online. You can go to the update at the address that's on there, www.la-dwh.com, and see there's about a 14-minute video. You can submit comments to the LA TIG through November the 18th of this year. So this will provide a highlight of work that's gone on in the last year with a little bit of a forward look till next year.
We're out in the marshes on an airboat, eating a piece of grasses. It's great.
We did donuts in the mud. That was pretty fun.
It's just fun, it's a great experience, it's teaching kids.
It's only day one, and at every moment I've already learned so much.
I like little alligators. I think they're really cute.
I'm most looking forward to canoeing, but we were told also that we were going to get to play volleyball in the mud, and that sounds very fun.
I also enjoy the mud very much, so it's just a win-win situation.
Mr. Chairman, I know we have a presentation a little bit later on the marsh maneuver programs, and that presentation will be much better than what I give. But I did want to highlight, we had some folks who went out and videoed some of the marsh maneuver programs earlier this year. This is just an absolutely fantastic program that makes a deep, meaningful connection to the youth that are able to take part in it. I think you can see the pictures. I think I heard the word mud 3 or 4 times, the center picture on the screen and the bottom picture on the screen as well. The folks who are involved in this program, whether they become someone who works in a coastal restoration job later in their life or not, it leaves an imprint on them that is indelible. And we're proud to be part of the sponsoring of this program and look forward to hearing the presentation a little bit later today. I've got a little note, some good news that we received about 2 weeks ago, that a grant that CPRA had submitted back in 2022 was funded through the National Fish and Wildlife, the NIFWIF Foundation, National Coastal Resilience Fund. The CPRA project was a project in St. Bernard, right on the border of Plaquemine Parish, called the Breton Land Bridge, Marsh, and Living Shoreline Creation Project. This is a project that's funded through CPRA, but this funding of about $8 million will help to supersize that project. We have a couple of other partners, environmental NGOs in this state, Ducks Unlimited and Audubon, who also received grants for projects. The Audubon project is enhancing resiliency of the Rainy Conservation Alliance landscape, and then the Ducks Unlimited, that project will be in the West Barataria basin evaluation and design for terraces in those areas. So we're very proud that the state fared relatively well. NIFWIF announced a little over $44 million through this grant program, 27 awards across the country. This is some really great work that's going on, not just in Louisiana, but across the country to make our coastal areas more resilient, but we were proud that Louisiana fared relatively well. I do have another update on another grant notification that we received just last week. This was from NOAA through the Climate Resiliency Grant. So the Climate Resiliency Grant is a large-scale grant that was made available with funding through the bipartisan bipartisan infrastructure law. Approximately $575 million nationwide were advertised, letters of intent were solicited, over 900 submissions were made to this program that requested over $15 billion. So it was $575 million available, $15 billion were requested. Very competitive. CPRA submitted 2 proposals, 2 letters of intent. We were invited to come back and submit. Of those 3 letters of intent we submitted, 2 of them were selected to come back and submit full proposals, and those are due in February of next year. So we were very proud that what we put forward was selected to move forward. We know a lot of folks who had submitted in Louisiana that weren't as fortunate, but we'll move forward with those. The 2 projects that we submitted were both regional projects, one in Terrebonne-Lafourche and one in Orleans, Jefferson, St. John, and St. Charles on the east bank of the river. The proposal that we submitted for the west bank of Plaquemine was not successful. So those we'll submit in February of next year. If we're successful, we hope to hear back probably around the April to May time period of 2024. Lastly, I'll note that a project that one of our parishes, Tangipahoa Parish, constructed back in 2013, the Lake Pontchartrain Shoreline Protection Project, won a Best Restored Shores Award last week from the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association at their national meeting up in Providence, Rhode Island. This was construction of a breakwater of approximately 1.7 miles. It was funded through the CPRA program. HDR was the engineer on this. So you can take a look at the before and after of the picture. So before construction on the left side, after, as they built this project and built access, they actually placed the material behind the breakwaters, and that material has vegetated up very nicely and was definitely deserving of the award that they received from ASBPA. A couple of other notes. We've heard from folks that sometimes we have a question about a project, but we just don't know where to go. We go to your website and we're confused by it. We don't know who to ask or where to call. If you have a question or you know someone who's got a question and they don't know who to call or who to email, coastal@la.gov. It's very simple. We'll get the right person to reply back to you and get an answer to your question. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, just kind of folks can connect with us across the board, across various platforms. I do recognize that some folks, myself included, aren't very social media savvy, but we are across all platforms and have videos and photographs and messages available for the public. With that said, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Well, thankfully, Greg, we have folks that are more savvy.
Yes, we do.
Perhaps you and I at the whole social media game. So, no, thank you for that update. I appreciate it. I'd ask the board if there are any questions or comments. All right. Thank you, Mr. Graney. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 7. Mr. Brian Lazino will present on the Southwest Coastal Program.
All right, thank you, Chairman, Board. I'm actually going to, voice is a little off. I'll use the microphone today, which is a rare thing for me. If you know me, I have a pretty loud voice, but happy to be with you this morning. Hopefully, I like that clip of win-win situation here, but to give an update on the Southwest Coastal Project. So as you see from the title, Administrator for Planning and Research, I have the honor of talking with y'all a bunch about where we think we're going in the future on here, whether it's master plan or feasibility studies and others. But it's always great to come talk about a project that we're actually putting on the ground, looking to put on the ground, and something that has an impact on the individual as well. And that's what I'm going to touch a little bit about Southwest Coastal Project update. So bear with me a little bit of background. I know we've spoken to the board about this, but hoping some members of the public see this as new as well. But the Southwest Coastal Project was started, large-scale feasibility study by the Corps of Engineers quite a few years ago, was actually completed in 2016, was the Chiefs reported 2016. This project is a risk reduction study and primarily focused on 2 areas for doing that: non-structural, which you see the coastal storm risk reduction management, and then environmental restoration as well. So this project actually was one of, hopefully not the last, but one of the last we've seen with a significant environmental restoration component tied to it with the Corps of Engineers completed study as well. Although I'm going to primarily talk about the structural component of that, which we have movement on right now. 3 parishes were included, Cameron, Calcasieu, and Vermilion parishes, and it's a large study. I'll show you the structures. It's about 4,000 structures included with today's price tag, and this actually may be a little bit higher, but about a $7 billion total, and a little over $1 billion for the non-structural component of this. So to dive into that a little bit further, first, we always like to say it's 100% voluntary to anybody listening on here. This is something you have to sign up for and is actually a voluntary program. But one of the big things about it on these studies was the forward-looking aspect of it. So it might be hard to see on your right there on the page or in the audience, but it's elevation of residential structures to the 2075 100-year base flood elevation. We all recognize in a lot of these areas that we're vulnerable now. Those of us that have lived through floods, it's easy to see. We have those life experiences, but not all of us look to the future the same way and realize what that might look like and where you're sitting could actually be under some water in the future with these storms. So this is one really huge key aspect of these studies, is to be forward-looking and to elevate these homes to protection all the way through that area. For some of the commercial structures, you'll see dry flood proofing and then risk reduction features like berms and other things for warehouses. So I mentioned large study. You see right there almost 4,000 structures with 3,400 of those listed as residential structures. Currently in fiscal year 22, the Corps' fiscal year, $1.6 billion price tag. That is 35% cost shared by the state of Louisiana. So since we last spoke, I believe myself and Mr. Broussard with the Corps of Engineers spoke with you a little bit about this. We've actually been fortunate enough with the Corps to sign the project partnership agreement. We've outlined some things already, but this is really the kick it in and go. This is outlining how we're going to do this, how we're going to fund this, the situations on who takes lead on what, those kinds of items, and that's we're fortunate to do here in Southwest Louisiana. You can see some of the pictures from the signing right there with the chairman and colonel and in general. So for those, hopefully the audience, and I would also ask from audience members and the board, you'll hear me say this a couple times, please help get this word out. We try our best, and I'll touch on that a little bit, but again, this is a project for individuals, and we need those individuals to come out and actually do that. So I wanted to touch on some of the eligibility requirements. Basically, that structure had to have been included in the Corps Final Feasibility Report database. So your home, your business had to have been, or the current home you're in, that structure has to have been in that database. And like I said, at almost 4,000 residential structures, that was quite a bit. The property has to have clear title. The property cannot previously receive grants or assistance for elevation of those structures. The structure is in a condition that can be elevated. Unfortunately, with such lag times that we see from when these projects are authorized to when they're funded and appropriated, in this particular case, as everybody who lives here knows, we see a lot of disaster in between, and we have seen that on some of these structures, unfortunately, and they do have to be in a condition that can withstand being elevated. And lastly, and these surveys will actually be done for the homeowner, but they cannot be contaminated with hazardous, toxic, radioactive waste or asbestos. So where are we at now? Previously, we were fortunate enough to have some work plan funding with the Corps and through the state over the last several years that we didn't just sit on our hands and wait for action. We were able to go in and do a pilot program to take, you see on your screen what's now 27 homes, and go through the survey and go through the steps it might take to do that. And now that we have the actual construction funding, we can move out on those 27 homes first. Plus take a look at the next 1,000 homes with the funding available. I should say right now, between congressional appropriations and the state's 35% cost share, we're at about $400 million of potentially available funding for the project, which should move those 1,000 homes here, those 1,000 structures. So the priority is really focusing on residential structures. We want to focus on the lowest elevation structures, the ones that are in the greatest risk today, and then into low to moderate income neighborhoods. The next step for those was completing registration forms, providing all the required documents, the property surveys, and all the required activities I mentioned that would need to be done before we can get a on-site contractor. And that's the really today's stuff. But at the same time, we're also trying to get updated information from the owners of those remaining structures. So you see 2,435 of those. Again, 2016 was when this study was completed, so a lot of life in between then and now. Also to sign up to be a part of all of these items, the meetings that we have, regular routine updates, and just be informed about the project so that they can make that decision when the time comes. And then we'll prioritize those as we go with available funding. So the benefits and potential costs of the participation. Obviously, I mentioned that the intended benefit was a reduction of storm surge-based flood risk. We want to always, this agency, enhance sustainability, and in this case do that by elevating structures that are prone to current and future risk, improving community resilience, and obviously maintaining the social fabric, the culture, and economic activities. And then I mentioned that cost share, so that burden is not transferred on to the homeowner as in some of the other programs that we've had. The state will take the 35% burden on behalf of that. So potential cost to the individual, and we want to be upfront about any of these just so, again, folks can make those determinations. If the structure is not up to code, that is depending on certain permits and conditions, that may be and often will be a cost that the homeowner has to bear. Obviously, if there's hazardous, toxic, or radioactive waste, we hope that's not the case. That's not always true. That will be something that the homeowner will have to do, and obviously title work if there's no clear title to that. A little bit different, though, about this particular part of the program is displacement costs. They will be covered for renters of these structures, but not covered for homeowners on here. And so, obviously, depending on when the construction would take place and the duration of that, that's something that would need to be looked at as well from the homeowner. But I will tell you, and if I missed it, that the core, the federal government, the state will not require, in many cases, like you see with other programs, quite a few of those things on here. And so we ask that folks stay up to speed on some of those items. So I mentioned just the public knowledge about this project and how we're trying to get out more. You see on your screen some of the venues that the team has worked over the last really couple months. And I'd like to take a minute to say thank you to not only the Rock Island District, the New Orleans District of the Corps of Engineers, but Team CPRA. And in some of these cases, these meetings, they're all at night. They're all one after the other. You can imagine we're answering a lot of questions and want to be everywhere, and it's a lot of work and effort, and I just want to say thank you to them for that. But again, we're asking for the participation of members of this board, members of the public. If you're out there, to please spread the word on this. After the meeting, myself and Michelle Felterman of my staff are happy to talk to you about these things to really understand the project and where we're going in the future. So just touching on the last couple slides, a little bit about timeline, and this one is the major steps in the process. And really, we're kind of in the 2 to 4, depending on what phase that you're looking at here is participation, and then confirming eligibility and surveying as we get some of those items down. And then, of course, we'll move to construction and the final adaptive managements of those. And then just a little bit on timeline right there. You can see we've executed the PPA. We're conducting many public meetings, volunteering, getting homeowners to sign up. And a lot of this is going on concurrently. So looking at design, bid, acquisition process to do this, to really get this on the ground. The Corps will be leading the charge on the actual contracting of these items. And then real estate and everything else. Long story short, hopefully those first 27, maybe a few more, May of 2024, looking to start elevating these homes. I will say, again, the team has had to remain adaptable. Those of us in the coastal area know our homes are not cookie cutter.
You can't just do a one-stop shop modular approach to this, and this does have some challenges, but the team, especially when the Rock Island team comes down from all the way up north, way up north to do this, they understand and are moving forward with that knowledge. And then lastly, again, public engagement. This is a website, and this presentation will be posted, so you'll be able to get to, excuse me, the website below. The court has populated now. You can see there's a big red apply now button on there. You can talk about eligibility. There's FAQs. There's a lot of other information about the program and where we are currently on there for the individual and any interested party on there. And so please do your best to get online and check that out. And again, spread the word through friends, family, and other avenues. And with that, Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that update, Brian. Appreciate that. I'll ask the board if they have any questions. Ms. Cormier.
I don't really have a question. I'm just grateful and thankful that this is moving forward after many, many, many years. I do want to make one note that everybody needs to pay attention to, is that this project, unlike grants that are coming down from FEMA, does not require the homeowners to have flood insurance. And that is very, very important, because what the parishes are finding out now, when they elevate a house sometimes, doesn't always lower the flood insurance rate because of the risk rating too low. So I think the best selling point for us is that it doesn't matter whether or not they have flood insurance. We're just getting them out of the way. And so that's another reason, and that should be on every single piece of literature moving forward from here on out in terms of that. And also, just to kind of give you an idea, out of those 2,400 and whatever number homes, after Hurricane Laura, the homeowners have changed so rapidly. I know in Calcasieu Parish, I don't know about anywhere else, but that the homeowners don't know they're on the grant. And so I know it's a neighborhood kind of wide approach. So I really do, I was talking to Michelle before the meeting, think that y'all are gonna have to go out and canvass neighborhoods, like knock on the door, because the homeowner on paper may not be the homeowner now. And so it's gonna, there's gonna be some communication problems. They have no idea they're on this grant. And so I think there's going to be a canvassing of neighborhoods required for that. So, and I'm just so grateful and thankful that this has come down and that we're moving forward on it. So thank you for all your hard work.
Appreciate that. Thank you again for yours, but both of those points. I was getting there on the insurance, and I dropped the ball on that, so I appreciate you saying that was one of the things I mentioned would not be a requirement like others, and one I'm always on the court to tell people as well, because that's a big one. The second, just as another, the Corps will be sending out certified letters on there to try and touch more folks, because as we've seen, there's also some that, unfortunately the home is either destroyed or they're not interested about the project, and we don't want to let the project linger on, maybe if we can go into some of these other homes that are a little further down the list, then we'll do that as well on there. But so, you're right, it really is, like we mentioned, trying to touch to the individual. So.
Well, and I think it's important to also know that these homeowners in certain areas, like there's a specific area on Lake Charles, they've been contacted by the parish many times with grants like 90-10 or 75-25, which means so they think in their mind, this is the same old grant stuff that we've said no to many, many times. Right. They have no idea that this is a whole new project from the Corps. It has really not much to do with the parish, and that it's 100% funded. It doesn't require flood insurance. So there's a lot of backtracking in communication we're going to have to do, because I know for sure that these certain neighborhoods have been canvassed, sent certified letters, mailed everything, but they're in their mind. So we went from like a 90-10, a 25-75% cost share to a 90-10 cost share to now it's 100% funding. They don't know the difference in all that. They said no 2 prior times because they had to put money out. But now you know, that's another thing. It's gonna be really, because these are the same neighborhoods we've been working on FEMA grants for years at the parish. So we've been doing this for 13 years, but this same knock on the door, hey, we have this grant available, are you? So I think it's really important that the 100% funding, which you had on there, and then the no insurance for sure is really a big deal because of risk rating 2.0.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So I
bringing that.
appreciate all your hard work.
Yeah, all very good points, Ms. Cormier, appreciate that. And that, you know, as Brian mentioned a time or two in his presentation is why, you know, we can't get the word out single-handedly. So everybody in this room, we're asking for your assistance in helping to get that message spread. Mr. Bourgeois, we'll come to you in a moment. Mr. Segrera had his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman Bryan, great presentation. Lori really touched on my question, but I wanted some clarification. If you're one of these 3,462 residential properties, how does, you know, are we going to be reaching out to each of these folks, or how does as a homeowner, how do you find out if you made that list, if you don't know already?
So,
That's not my question.
right, you can apply, and then, like I said, that website right there would be a great source of information for folks. If not, there's also contact information. Folks can send info to the team on there and do that, because we have seen a lot of, like you mentioned, it's been a long, long time, so transfer of ownership or other items, you know, and so that's a big deal, yeah. So, but that's a bunch of good avenues up there, and that goes right to a dedicated line now. You can't see it on the screen, but either leaving a message on phone or calling somebody, and I'll send an email for the project as well to the program manager.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Bourgeois?
So, you know, Laurie said that this grant, if you will, or this whole project will not require you to have flood insurance as a function of the grant. But my question remains that, because this was something we talked about before, and I believe that even though you're not required it as a grant, if the property sits in a special flood hazard area, you may still have to get flood insurance as a function there. My point in bringing it up is just to say it doesn't matter. Get in this program, because we've got one side of the federal government that recognizes that elevating a structure prevents flooding, which is pretty much common sense. And we've got another side of the federal government who says that doesn't make any difference anymore, called FEMA. And so my point is, let's encourage everybody to live in the real world where this elevation process will prevent them to have flooding. So that's something I wanted to make sure that we were clear on.
Yep.
Even though we are encouraging people, and the good news is it doesn't require you to get it if you're not in a, well, if you, as compared to other programs, it doesn't require you to get it. But if you're in a special flood hazard area, you may still need to get it, is what I'm thinking, and I would think that you need to make sure that you can.
Sure, and if you're a mortgagee, that's, you know, that's not going to wipe the slate clean on there or anything else from that requirement that the bank may have on you, but that it's.
The good news is.
But for the rest of the folks, yeah, that's an option.
And I did have one follow-on point. You said that the property had to be up to code. Who makes a determination in this particular case of the property being up to code? Is it still left to local inspectors, the parishes?
Right, so some of these things are going to be parish inspectors and then working with the construction company on there to be able to do that. So obviously there's, yeah.
Well,
We're going to have to get into that a little bit, but yeah.
That's good news, because if it was federal contractors coming in and trying to figure out code,
Right.
that would be very bad. So
Right.
again, trying to encourage everybody to stay in the program in spite of what FEMA may or may not do.
Right, and this is something we've spoken with the parishes about a lot as well, a lot of outreach with actual parish folks, because it could be a significant burden as well. So we want to make sure that everybody knows what's coming for that.
Mr. Reeves, but before you comment, I'll add, we're challenged with the number of microphones we have. Judge or Doug, are y'all able to hear the board members in the back? Okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. Reeves?
Yeah, just one comment on the flood insurance requirement. That's probably a distinction. A lot of the programs come under the Stafford Act, which actually has a statutory requirement that if you've received this funding, you know, it triggers the flood insurance in a flood hazard area. The two comments I wanted to make, though, is that on the title work, I don't know the level of clear title that you're requiring, but if you are running across unclear title, and if you're paying attention to the economic levels of the household, you may want to partner or set up a resource to get folks referred to Acadiana Legal Services, because they can work on assisting on clearing titles for households. Well, in my field, we talk about it low to moderate income.
Right.
In the HUD level, they have a different speak for that. And then also, I guess, also be mindful of on the up to code requirement that could have an impact on availability of the program to folks that don't have the economic resources. So just be mindful of that, and maybe be looking for nonprofit assistance if there's something that needs to be done to help that household get qualified for the activity.
I appreciate both of those comments. They're very important. We have seen in other work that we do, non-structural work, the title, of course, in Louisiana, title can be an extreme financial challenge on folks. So we are looking at other avenues to try and help on that. Especially we run into a lot of folks have an open successorship on anything, and it's so overwhelming they haven't had to on there to do that. And to the code, you hit on an important one. It's whether it's that or whether things might impact their homeowner's insurance with elevation. We want to be really transparent with folks over all these potential issues before they make the decision to join the program. Because like we all know, there can be indirect costs associated with some of these things as well. So thank you for that.
They're also increasing the tax value.
Right. That's right. So.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Cormier.
Just to be clear, someone just asked me a question, or I went and, anyway, just to be clear, the 2,439 homes, there are no additional homes added to this program. And so if there, and this is expounding on that question, if there's leftover monies, let's say out of the 2,000 homes, we only do 1,500. Because they're destroyed by war or whatever, will that money then roll over to the coastal restoration side to be, do we know the answer to that? I don't know the answer to that, so I'm just curious.
No, we don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so that'll be future years, younger people in the room, when I pass on, that's your question.
I hope that is a problem we have to address right now, but currently, we're poised to try and do what we can on what we currently been appropriated. So.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, no homes are being added to this program.
Correct. It is. They would have had to have been identified, those structures, within the current previous planning effort. Yep.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you, Ms. Cormier. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? Well, good discussion on that. It is indeed good to be moving on this project. This has been a long time coming. I think, a few take-homes as a result of Brian's presentation and the discussions here. One is $400 million or so has come to this region for risk reduction. That's an unprecedented investment in this region, and certainly in this region for risk reduction. I would also point out that there is, in comparison to the $400 million, it's relatively small, but $10 million has been appropriated for ecosystem restoration in the region as well. And that's very important, obviously, as we all know. Like no other region of the state, our wetlands and barrier shorelines and so forth in this region are certainly as Ms. Cormier has said often, Cameron Parish is Calcasieu Parish's first line of defense, right? It's protection. So we do have a crediting MOU in place. So some of the work that's being done by CPRA, by the parishes in this region and so forth will hopefully be creditable. And we'll get into that discussion in Neil's presentation in a little while, but will hopefully be creditable against the federal project that is the Southwest Coastal Project. So we are thinking ahead a bit as it relates to that. And anyhow, it's good news. It's good to be moving out. So Mr. Lazina, I appreciate the presentation. If there are no more questions from members of the board, we will move on to the next agenda item. Seeing none, agenda item number 8, ask Dr. Stephen Barnes and Ms. Anna Oslin to present on offshore wind revenue projections. As many of you know, a bid was held for offshore wind energy resources in this region of the state at the end of August, and Dr. Barnes and Ms. Oslin will be here to talk a little bit about that and its implications to the state and our coastal program. Dr. Barnes, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about some work that we've been doing at the Blanco Center. You can see on the first slide here that we had a large team of collaborators working with us on this, including Claudia Lorenzano, who is here today, Matthew Holland, and Chen Han Shao. But just to prevent handing the mic over too many times, I'm going to split the presentation with Dr. Osland. But this presentation is going to be a summary coming out of 2 reports that we've developed. We did early in the year kind of an in-depth dive into the leasing structure and really trying to understand the revenue structure and potential future revenues for offshore leasing in federal waters for wind development. And then given the more recent lease sale in August, we have an abbreviated policy brief that we've just updated that includes a little more specifics about that particular lease sale. So if you want the deep dive, we've got a nice long study that gets into a lot of detail. If you want the quick read with some details about the lease sale, you can check the policy brief. But we're happy to share an overview of some of that. This is work that was funded with support from Restore the Mississippi River Delta and the Greater Lafourche Port Commission. As we looked ahead to this first auction in the Gulf of Mexico for offshore wind development, I think there were a lot of questions starting to emerge about what this future potential really looks like, how rapidly might we see growth here. Obviously, in recent years, many of you are probably familiar with big headlines coming out of other parts of the country with a lot of interest and seem to be rapidly building momentum to really accelerate the development of offshore wind. Of course, with the Biden administration and kind of federal environment very supportive of that and conducive of that. And so we had a lease sale, the first ever lease sale in the Gulf of Mexico announced, including one area off the coast of Louisiana, right near Lake Charles, and 2 leasing areas near Galveston off the coast of Texas. And so with that kind of opportunity on the horizon, we started some work at the Blanco Center to really try to make kind of a clear picture for the public, for groups like this, to have a good sense of what this new and emerging framework really looked like. I know a lot of people in the room today are familiar with oil and gas leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. It's been going on for about 70 years. And what we're seeing here is modeled in many ways off of that type of framework, with offshore revenues being made up of 3 major sources of money or dollar amounts. We've got bonus bids that are paid up front when companies want to secure a lease in order to develop for offshore wind. While they are building out and developing those sites, they will pay rent on those leased areas. And finally, as those sites go into operation and begin actually producing electricity, they'll pay operating fees, which is sort of the equivalent of the royalty paid on oil or natural gas brought out of a kind of traditional leased area. Couple of notes, a lot of these things are similar to the structures that we've seen again in oil and gas. For those of you familiar with that, the bonus bid is paid up front. Given the structure of minimum lease or bid amounts, as well as what we've seen recently, especially with a great deal of interest and highly competitive bidding in other parts of the country, we generally expect the bonus bids to be by far the largest source of revenue coming in to the federal government. Rents are paid at a much lower rate. In the case of oil and gas, rents are paid until the first kind of measurable amount of oil or natural gas is produced. In the case of offshore wind, it's a more gradual and incremental build out. So initially, you'd be paying rent on the entire area. As you begin to bring some of those turbines online, then those portions of the lease that are operating would switch to paying your operating fee, and the balance of the leased area would continue to pay rent. So it's a more incremental phasing from moving away from rents towards the operating fees. And then finally, of course, the operating fee is the longer term source of revenue. But we'll talk a little bit more about the structure of those. So the leases are paid at a rate of $3 per acre, and the operating fee is based on the formula that you see there along the bottom of the screen. Said briefly, if you look at the first three elements there, the installed capacity measured in megawatts, times the total hours per year that it would operate, assuming continuous operation, times a capacity factor, which is set in the lease sale. And for the Gulf of Mexico lease sale, that was a capacity factor of 0.3. Those three things together really get at how much electricity is produced. So the total quantity of electricity produced is based on how many turbines, or the total capacity for those turbines, how long they would operate for, and this capacity factor, which is really a way of getting at, a combination of several things, including how strong the winds are, how steadily they will blow, and over the course of the year, what does that installed capacity actually produce? Something that many of you may have heard is concerns that the wind speeds are not as favorable in the Gulf of Mexico as we see in other parts of the United States and other parts of the world where we have a lot more development in offshore wind. So the other lease sales that we've had previously in the United States had a capacity factor of 0.4. So what we're seeing here with this capacity factor of 0.3 is a reflection of the fact that, yes, the wind speeds are not as strong or robust throughout the course of the year in the Gulf of Mexico. And then the last thing I'll mention about that is after 6 years of operation, we're able to really see how much power is actually being produced. So on the front end, companies and BOEM really are sort of anticipating how much power might be able to be produced. But as time passes and we see how much power is actually produced, the operating fee is going to shift over to be based on actual production. Finally, the last two pieces there tell us, first of all, what's the value of all of that power produced, which is based on wholesale prices. So when we think about different types of business structures where you might have an operator using that power and a relationship with a partner that's not necessarily going out onto the market or being sent directly to residential users, none of those things will really matter in terms of the public revenues that are generated here. It's based on wholesale prices. And then finally, that operating fee rate of 2%, which again is sort of like the royalty rate. And so that's something at this stage of development, with offshore wind still being a fairly new thing domestically, technology still evolving and improving over time, that's a fairly low operating fee, but that may be something that we could see in future years, 5, 10 years from now, something that could go up once these operations become more profitable with advances in technology. The last thing I'll talk about as far as kind of the broader survey of offshore wind developments and what can we expect in the context of the Gulf of Mexico. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how this area really compares to other parts of the country where we have seen big investments, or at least a lot of excitement with prior lease sales. And we're trying to break that down here to think about the major drivers of decisions. So that top row, net value, is really thinking broadly about the total value of this opportunity from a business standpoint. That includes upfront investment costs to build out the structures, and then the long-term revenue opportunity to generate revenue from the offshore wind. So we've kind of laid this out in somewhat of a chronological order at a high level. So we make those investments first, and then we'll see the payoff over time. But then within that, we're just sort of pulling out and highlighting some of the major drivers there. So in terms of development costs, big drivers are whether the geographic area allows for fixed platforms. So if you've got a shallower offshore shelf area, you can develop fixed platforms versus floating turbines, which are much more expensive to build on the front end. We got to think about the workforce, not only to build out, but also support and maintain these, which compared to the Gulf of Mexico, we would say that, well, we think the Gulf of Mexico has a strong advantage there, given our historical strengths in oil and gas, and the ability to cross over a lot of similar skills there. Similarly, for infrastructure, we think the Gulf of Mexico has a lot of advantages there. So as we look at other parts of the country, those would have been kind of minuses compared to what we would expect to see long-term here in the Gulf. And then finally, research and development, and that's really something that's going to be tied to the turbine size. So we talked about wind speed. When companies know that they're looking at a less favorable wind environment, they're going to design the turbines differently. They're going to make them bigger, and they're going to think about other ways they may need to customize those designs to operate best in that specific environment. So we know that's something where there's more work, there's current ongoing work happening here in the Gulf of Mexico area, including specifically here in Louisiana, but more work will need to be done to make sure that as those projects are really start to move forward, that we've got the right designs in place related to that too, making sure that we've got resilient designs that can withstand or adapt for hurricane conditions. On the other side, of course, in terms of the revenue picture, that first item there, wind speed, is the big driver. That is probably the first thing that we should have touched on, in terms of importance. And so we've talked about the fact that the Gulf of Mexico wind speeds are not as robust and favorable as we see on the Atlantic or Pacific coast. And also worth noting that even within the Gulf of Mexico, the wind speeds generally tend to be more favorable as you head further west. So when we think back to that first map and we saw the Lake Charles area and the two areas off the coast of Galveston, even across that small geography, you can see notable differences in terms of increasing favorability of wind conditions as you move to the west. Electricity prices generally very low in the Gulf, which is something that is often touted as a good thing for business, industrial development, and consumers. If you're thinking about investing hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in developing an offshore wind facility, and you can only sell your electricity at a low price, that's going to make it a lot harder to get those projects off the ground. And then finally, a renewable portfolio standard, which is something that kind of relates back to price, but something that's really kind of a one-off modifier. So if you've got a state that's got a renewable portfolio standard that's requiring a certain percentage of power to be generated from renewable sources or even specifically from wind, that's something that obviously can really drive up interest because you've got a captive demand there for purchasing that product. So broad pattern here, obviously a lot of things that made these other parts of the country look favorable. Gulf of Mexico does have some features that are more favorable. But I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Oslin here to talk a little more about the recent lease sale and what we've learned now that we've seen the first go at it here in the Gulf.
All right, so our first wind auction was on August 29th, and so as we were looking at that, one of the other things that wasn't on that last sort of grid there were some of the factors that also go into the auction. So as you can imagine, if you have more people bidding, they can bid the price up. So there were 16 eligible bidders that were put in all the paperwork to become eligible to bid on the 3 wind zones in the Gulf of Mexico. We only saw 2 bids on the Lake Charles section, and there were no bids on either of the Galveston sections, which was sort of surprising looking at all of the companies that had put in the paperwork to become eligible for that. I think the other thing, Stephen touched on the capacity changes that they made with the final lease sale versus the initial call for proposals. So all of those companies became eligible when the capacity factor was still at 0.4 before it went to the 0.3, which we thought was interesting that they would downgrade that expected capacity for the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps in a expectation that might provide those companies with a little bit more leeway in terms of becoming profitable. The other thing that was unique with the Gulf wind auction were the opportunities to use credits for workforce and supply chain and fishing compensatory mitigation. And our winning bidder actually took advantage of both of those. So we'll keep going and just talk a little bit about that wind auction. RWE was a German company that won the bid at $55 an acre. and use both of those different credits. So I'm really excited to see how they're going to be using those credits for workforce training and especially, and also with the domestic supply chain. I think that as sort of the first location in the Gulf of Mexico, those additional investments in workforce here will actually pay dividends in terms of a longer term offshore wind industry here. And, you know, we've got some state waters that they're working on, you know, similar projects. So I think that there'll be some carryover there. So, you know, where did our Gulf of Mexico wind auction, what does it look like compared to some of the other auctions? So as we're thinking about, you know, looking at the price per acre, we're very similar to where the Kitty Hawk North Wind auction from 2017. So you can see that there's been, you know, a real upswing in prices with a lot of excitement over, especially the New York Bight auction in 2022. And as we're looking at Louisiana, we're like, should we be disappointed because, you know, the price was so low? But really, as we're thinking about, this is the first auction in the Gulf of Mexico, and we're looking at, you know, the first auction in the, you know, Southern Atlantic there in North Carolina. These are pretty similar. So people putting their toes in, seeing what it's going to be like, and as we get those turbines up and the project off the ground, I think there's still a lot of optimism to see where it will go in future auctions. You can see that the second North Carolina auction in 2022, the price per acre was quite a bit higher. But just to kind of contextualize that a little bit, some of the other things that happened right before this Gulf of Mexico wind auction, you guys have all heard about the supply chain concerns that have been, you know, basically going on since 2020, and, you know, those haven't abated, especially for some of the wind projects that are actually under construction. And so there's concern that, you know, being able to get the project off the ground will run into some of those things, especially in addition to the increasing inflation that, you know, the Federal Reserve has been trying to address with, you know, higher interest rates, which makes it more challenging for companies to borrow. It's just more expensive. A few other things that happened, just a few weeks before the wind auction, they came out with additional protection for the rice whale in the Gulf of Mexico. And so we're not sure, but we're curious, thinking that some of those companies that either work in the Gulf or even, you know, potentially don't work in the Gulf are thinking about how those different protections and requirements would impact their project. So knowing that those happened and there wasn't a lot of time for companies to really figure out where that was going to go and how it would impact them, may have decided to just sit out this auction and see how that all worked out. Also, the wind auction took place on the anniversary of Katrina's landfall, and right at the same time as Hurricane Idalia was, you know, barreling toward the Florida coast. And so if you're not someone who's working in the Gulf of Mexico, the double whammy of all of the reminders of Katrina and an additional potentially Category 4 hurricane barreling toward Florida may have given you pause to just think about that. And then finally, something that's been really interesting, and to put in context sort of the lack of bids for the Texas locations versus the Lake Charles location, is this last legislative year, there's been a lot of discussion and bills in Texas to sort of reduce the state support for renewables in Texas. And here in Louisiana, you know, that wasn't the case during this legislative session. And in fact, you know, we've got a lot of support for, you know, a bunch of different things going on here that is really having a very different climate compared to Texas. In addition, the grid problems that Texas had over the last few years, you know, Louisiana is connected to the MISO grid, so there's a much larger range of potential communities that could be interested in purchasing wind power compared to the Texas grid. So just a few things that you know, potentially would impact interest in bidding on Louisiana sections versus Texas. So, just, did you want to?
As I get into this, just to kind of recap some thoughts about some of the different factors that we highlighted there, certainly worth keeping in mind that, these companies are talking about massive investments, and they're running the numbers. And I think a lot of those factors are things that we think about kind of on the margin. So if you had, so I think the big story of all of those things is a big spike in costs for developing offshore wind, which we've heard about in other developments that might have had high degree of optimism, billions of dollars of bonus bids a few years ago. Now that they're working on building those out, we've heard a lot of problems start to materialize as they're wrestling with real-world cost escalation. So long list of bidders who are interested in the Gulf, and as they're kind of running the numbers and watching the environment, if projects are close, or at least they don't have enough cushion to be confident in making those big investments, any one of those bullets further down that list are things that could just sour them and say, well, let's hold off and wait a little bit. So again, I think the exciting thing is we had one company step up and secure a bid, and they're planning to move forward. And so I think once we start to see that really take shape, I think that's going to help really serve as a catalyst for a broader set of investment. So thinking, one of the other things that we talked a lot about in the months leading up to that first lease sale is that structure that the bonus bids tend to be the largest source of funds that go into that are generated at the federal level from offshore wind. And there's a parallel conversation happening in the context of wind to what has been talked about for many years now with offshore oil and gas revenues and Go Mesa, which I know you all heard about and are familiar with. But knowing that that first bid is where the lion's share of the dollars come from, at least while the operating fee is 2%, means we've got to get the federal policies right early in the development of this industry. We can't sit around and watch it unfold and come back 5 or 10 years from now, and then we shouldn't wait to figure out what was the right way to structure these policies. So, certainly I think we're making the case for thinking through seriously how we manage those revenues for offshore wind at the federal level, and also thinking about how that might be tied in with oil and gas revenue sharing as a broader way of thinking about energy resources. So I think there's still a lot of latitude there for thinking through smart ways to do that at the federal level that can be very beneficial specifically for Louisiana and the coastal program that we're here talking about today. In addition, development of state renewable portfolio standards and procurement programs like power purchase agreements, offshore wind renewable energy certificates. We've seen this in other parts of the country. The places that have some local policy that's supportive there is very much a game changer. So obviously these are things that I think there are a lot of well-formed thoughts around whether these are good ideas or not amongst the key stakeholders. But even doing these things at maybe a certain small kind of phased scale might be a way to help cultivate and grow this industry early in the Gulf of Mexico. And I think Anna touched on this earlier as we think about workforce development, building up a supply chain. The fact that we do have we know that Louisiana companies are already involved in work around the country and even around the world in helping to develop offshore wind. But I think the more we can do over the next several years to help build up the domestic supply chain, specifically in Louisiana, supporting offshore wind, is going to be, I think, a competitive advantage that puts us in the driver's seat for many years to come, even if we're seeing more and more developments down the road off the coast of Texas and heading further west, chasing the good wind. So some other kind of urgency to consider there as well. And that's all we've got.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Barnes, Dr. Oslin. Certainly appreciate that presentation. I did have a couple questions and then a comment, but maybe I'll ask the board if they have any questions that they'd like to ask. Mr. Bourgeois.
Sure do. To be clear, the CPRA obviously has been one of the most active agencies in the state with regards to chasing GOMESA, but as it stands now, just so that everybody knows, all of the revenues for this go where? And, you know, in spite of the fact that we have to have the investment, we have to have, you know, the service companies that provide the services and the infrastructure, but just to be clear, where does it go? In other words,
All revenue that comes out of offshore wind is held and kept at the federal level.
right, which is patently unfair in this case. You know, it's not with the standard we have for oil and gas. And I don't know if you wanted to add something to that, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just going to say the work, because we have the new workforce and fishing compensatory mitigation credits, those actually have to be done. The workforce and supply chain has to be done locally. So those investments will be here. So that's actually an advantage for us. And then the fishing compensatory mitigation, it's interesting. The company can either set up their own, or they can run it through a state program if there is one, or a federal program. So that clearly could be an opportunity for Louisiana there as well to help funnel that to local fishermen. You know, it's supposed to be for loss of.
I think it's good, but it's a one-time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a small amount. Both of those are small amounts compared to the larger.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good that it's there. That's something that's unique, and I'm glad it's there. But the second part of my question, if you will, is the capacity factor seems to be the biggest thing here, right? If you're setting up things to where your capacity factor in this particular case was set at the 0.3, and then that's for the first 6 years, and you adjust it at the end of 6 years, how clear is that to the potential bidder that he has a potential of getting a better capacity factor at some point in the future to encourage his development? And what could the state do, in your opinion, to encourage a way to get a better capacity factor so that we can get this whole industry started?
So I think, so the capacity factor is intended at the beginning of a lease sale to serve as a rough picture of how much power do we actually think we might produce here. So, and Anna mentioned that when the notice of the sale was initially published, it showed at 0.4. That, and so it doesn't say how much will or won't be produced, but it says how much of an operating fee are those companies going to pay in the early years. Right. So as we think through, trying to unpack what did we see happen with this first lease sale in August, we had a long list of companies who were signing up based on their own, understanding of opportunity in the Gulf, the due diligence they had done in terms of thinking about costs and potential revenues. And they were thinking they might have to pay an operating fee at 2%, assuming a capacity factor of 0.4. When the real lease sale happened, that had been dropped to 0.3, which means those companies were now saying operating fees are going to be a little lower. If anything, that should have boosted interest, right? I suspect a big part of why it went from 0.4 to 0.3 is what Boeing was hearing from the companies, that 0.4 is too high. Yeah, you're using that in other parts of the country. That's too high. Nobody's going to hit that capacity in the Gulf. But I think what we are seeing is a little bit of a kind of clumsy federal process here where we're kind of ballparking numbers. We don't have a lot of data because we don't have a lot of real world scale operators, right? And so I think there's certainly more work to be done within the research community. And of course, tracking very closely as we start to see the first projects come online. That's going to help set up an environment that's a little more on target. So I think we're working through the early growing pains here right now, and I think what we saw with this first Louisiana lease sale was a lot of companies stepping back and saying, "I need a little more time," or we need to see costs come down a little bit too.
And I guess where I was at, that's the one factor that pits us against other parts of the nation. And supposedly, it's tied to the amount of wind or wind speed, but it's not really just wind speed, right? It's the consistency of the wind. You can design around any given speed. You just need to make sure that you're getting that speed consistently. So it just seems to me that that's an area that is questionable in the whole mix. And you can't really change their opinions of what their threat is for hurricanes and the other types of things. But this is something that I would encourage CPRA to continue to be involved in. I know Neil follows all of this stuff very quickly, and I think it is our future. I mean, I'll channel my inner Chet Chasson real quick. It doesn't really matter what our oil sector is hauling around in the Gulf of Mexico to get things done. We just need to keep these people busy doing what it is. And we all know innately that this is a supplement to oil and gas and not a replacement. And I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? Ms. Cormier.
Just a question about the high migratory species in Louisiana. We have such a high wind. Why not waive the energy instead of the wind, and benefits to the fish habitat and reduce migratory impact? So basically, the windmills will alter and impact the migration of birds, and how are we looking at that? Are we looking at that?
I mean, I'll say kind of, I think you also kind of referenced the compensatory fund that can be used to address fishing concerns, and I think it's a very good point that the same, I would think the same should be available for migratory birds and even any other negative environmental impact.
Matt or Keith, yeah, Matt, you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm curious, a very good point. Are those compensatory funds for fishing impacts, which you suggest could be used for wildlife impacts, are they used for wildlife impacts in other states that have programs that are further along?
Yeah, I think this is the first time they've had that, and it's actually targeted more at commercial or I'm not actually sure if it's, but you have to be out there fishing, so it's like at the business level rather than the fish level would be, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe.
I'll echo Ms. Earlier comments that, Louisiana is unique, that we're in a lot of migratory flyways and pathways, and our impacts are expected to be a lot higher than other states, and it's something that should factor in, whether it's, whether it's us being able to use those mitigation credits to build projects to offset those impacts on Louisiana's coast, or whether it's some other, way those funds can be applied in Louisiana. But it's a little unique to our state.
Yeah, and there is a pretty involved permitting process that has to be worked through that I know is going to at least look at those things, and there's going to be some requirements to account for negative impacts there. I think the opportunity to take directly, a strategy to address those things, we can integrate that into the bidding process, makes a lot of sense. The other thing I will say about these two new funds, the workforce and the fishing-related mitigation fund, is these are concepts that have been introduced, and I think we're still waiting to get a better understanding of what exactly the winning bidder proposed there and exactly what those programs are going to look like. So there's some options for what they can do with that, and I don't know that we know yet exactly what those plans look like.
Yeah, I think I would, go ahead, Dr. Osmond.
No, the only thing I was going to add to that is that I would say in future, wind auction opportunities, like obviously if we can add 2 new compensatory funds, like if we want to go down that road, I don't know why we can't open the discussion about other things too, so.
Well, and I think the point needs to be made that, if we're impacting the fish, I don't really understand other than the actual structure impacting the fish. But if the windmill hits a bird, the bird is dead, and there's the fish are not dying because of it, they're just displaced. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I think it actually has to do with the fishermen whose livelihood is displaced by the construction and things that are going on. I think we'll find out more.
So we're not protecting the fish, we're protecting the fisher people. Okay, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, that's my understanding, but again, I think we'll learn more as we go forward with that.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is a result of the construct that was developed by BOEM, not Wildlife and Fisheries or DNR, or CPRA for that matter. I do know, Matt, that a colleague of yours presented to the Mineral Board, I believe last week, related to this issue specifically. And I know, Keith and Matt, that you guys and your agencies are working closely together on this issue as the regulators associated with this resource. So it might be worthwhile to invite Wildlife and Fisheries to come back and perhaps give that presentation to the board, since this question is being raised sometimes in the next meeting or two.
Yeah, we appreciate that opportunity.
Okay, good. Any other comments or questions from the board? I had just a couple. One, and Dr. Osland, I think both of these were from the portion of the presentation that you were given, but the incentives or the credits, I guess, that were provided for workforce and supply chain and the fisheries that we were just discussing, is that included in the 5.6 million bid? So that's...
Yeah, those are a credit.
Okay.
So
it's not in addition to 5.6, it's part of it? Okay.
No, yeah, those are considered like additional, like part of their cash bid, basically.
Okay. And then you'd mentioned, I guess, kind of the increase from bid 1 to bid 2 related to the North Carolina bids, but it looks to me, based on your graph, that the same situation held true for both Massachusetts and New York. And I understand, I guess, maybe the second bid in New York was a little bit of a larger lease area, but is it reasonable to assume then, based on that, or hope maybe is a better term than assume, but that we would see that in Louisiana as well?
Well, I would certainly hope so. And, I think that probably my thought as a, not wind operator is that once we see the first wind farm operational, whether it's in state waters or federal waters, that there'll be a lot more comfort in the Gulf of Mexico. So put whatever the first wind farm is offshore through a hurricane, it does fine, it keeps on going, then it's game on, and I think it'll be, open season for wind. But that's just a guess, right? And you can see that obviously, North Carolina and New York, they have hurricanes as well. So when we're really thinking about, these different, wind farms wherever, I think the more comfort that there is with, getting a wind farm off the ground, and once we can get some of the different inflation and supply chain challenges sort of under control, I think that there'll be a lot more opportunities. But yeah, I'm pretty excited that we actually had 2 bids on this first one, and you can look at this and you're right. You can see that there's generally been an upward trend. We're a little bit lower than all of those, but between those California and the all the bids that were happening in 2022 and the Gulf of Mexico, there were a lot of things that were happening that would have greatly impacted companies thinking about bidding on that area.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I would just say, and Mr. Bourgeois stole my thunder a bit as it relates to how this could potentially be tied into GOMESA. Many of the folks in the audience, certainly members of the board, are aware of the Shores Coalition. We've made a run, of course, to increase the amount of revenue sharing from energy production off Louisiana's coast to include wind. And this is a new and exciting, opportunity. If you're in Vermilion, Calcasieu, or Cameron parishes, you've had projects that have been funded through GOMESA, and that's directly a result of the revenues, obviously, that have come from the state associated with energy production off our coast. So please keep that in mind. We'll be making another push, likely, at the beginning of next year, and just stay tuned for more information related there. And then, I know I said lastly a second ago, this is really lastly. When we talk about wind, some of us have a tendency, I think, to allow our eyes to glaze over and think of this as a green issue, right? Strictly an environmental issue. But I would just point out that one of the tenets of Louisiana's master plan is a working coast. And whether that is petrochemical energy production, it's underwater basket weaving, it's transportation, it's wind, whatever you want it to be or whatever it can be, it's a part of our working coast and supports our citizens, supports our communities, and allows us to be able to live along and enjoy our coast. And so I hope folks, when they hear us talking about this wind lease and this wind sale, understand that it's as much about diversifying and strengthening Louisiana's economy and taking advantage of, as Dr. Barnes mentioned, Louisiana's competitive advantage in the logistics and the support of energy production along our coast, whether that's oil and gas, wind, or something else. as it is about an alternative energy source. So I'll leave it at that. Dr. Barnes, Dr. Osmond, very much appreciate your work and for you presenting with us here today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 9. Ms. Lauren Noble will present on the Marine Mammal Stranding Network.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Board, for giving me this opportunity to come speak to you. My name is Lauren Noble, and I'm the Louisiana Marine Mammal Stranding Network Coordinator. I'm an ERT contractor with NOAA Fisheries. And in this presentation, I'm just going to briefly give a summary of the Louisiana TIG Enhanced Marine Mammal Stranding Network Program. This program came about because of early restoration funds. If you look, what's highlighted in red is Louisiana going vertical, and horizontal is marine mammals. So where those intersect is 50 million. And out of that pot of money came the Louisiana TIG Enhanced Marine Mammal Stranding Network Program. It's roughly about 3.1 million of that 50, and it's a 5-year project. It started in 2021. And in this program, my position was created, and I was brought on to help increase the capacity and expanding partnerships along the Louisiana coastline and marine mammal stranding response. I want to increase the ability to diagnose cause of illness and death in marine mammals and use that information to better understand the population health here off our coast. To also fill in gaps of capability and spatial coverage throughout personnel, material, resources throughout our coastline, to improve timeliness of response and to enhance the survival and improve diagnostic of illness, and also to help inform future restoration efforts, monitoring, and adaptive management. So the Louisiana Marine Mammal Stranding Network is made up of myself, and I'm located in Baton Rouge, and also Audubon's Coastal Wildlife Network, and they're located in New Orleans. And historically, there's been a limited capability or capacity to respond to strandings across our coastline. As you know, we have a very unique coastline, and it's not always the easiest to get to. We've needed boats, we've needed big trucks that can go up on these beaches, and we also needed ability to lift these animals onto our trucks and get them back to a necropsy facility. On average, approximately 81 cetaceans die in Louisiana each year, and of those, 5% are usually found alive, and 95% are found dead. And then this graph also shows you that compared to the rest of the Northern Gulf, Louisiana deals with the most out of habitat cases, and a lot of that can be due to the hurricanes and floodings that we see. I'll get into more of the out of habitats a little later. So when I first came on, in order to figure out where we were struggling and how to improve, I took 20 years of stranding data for just Louisiana, and I kind of broke it up into these 3 sections. Everything you see in blue is your pre-DWH period. That covers from 2000 to 2009. Everything in green is your DWH period, and that's 2010 through 2014. And then post is 2015 through 2020. As you can see, there was definitely, Louisiana saw a lot more strandings in DWH, and a lot of that can be said for the amount of people that were on the beaches as well, doing beach cleanups. And then we also had that spike in 2019, and that was due to the UME, which is unusual mortality event of freshwater. And that was eastern Louisiana all the way to the Panhandle. And that orange line represents codes 2 and 3. Here in Louisiana, we have very hot summers, so dolphin carcasses can easily go from a fresh dead dolphin to a severely decomposed carcass very quickly, within a couple hours. So our goal is to really get to the cases when they're in codes 2 and 3, because that's when we're able to get more samples, get organs when they're in better conditions, and so that we can help diagnose the cause of death for these animals. And then I also wanted to take a look at all the parishes along our coastline to see which gets the most response and stranding reports. And as you can see, Cameron and Jefferson Parish get the most, and a lot can be said because those are the two areas where very public beaches. This is where everybody goes to. Grand Isle is in Jefferson. You have Holly Beach, May Beach, and Rutherford in Cameron. So those are the two areas I really tried to focus these early on years of this project to bring awareness of the stranding network. And you'll see in the next couple slides as well. So these are, to explain this graph, these are kind of the components I really wanted to improve upon in my role in this position. I think everything can improve as long as we go to the bottom row, and that is how long from initial report to exam. We want to get that call of a marine mammal on the beach and get to that carcass as soon as possible. That gives us the best chance. And so I kind of broke it up into years, but our post-DWH, we had 30% that were responded to on that same day. 21% were 2 days or longer. In my first year, in 2021, we improved a little bit. We gained to 34% were responded to on the same day, and 8% 2 days or longer. Last year, we improved. We got to 49%, and we had zero reports that took 2 days or longer. So, and I think a lot can be said because with this TIG program, we were able to get a boat, we were able to get trucks, so we're able to get to these carcasses a lot sooner. Now, the second part of this is outreach, trying to get the public to know what we do, who to call when they see these animals on the beaches. So like I said, my main focus in this early on project was to hit up Cameron and Jefferson Parish. We hosted 2 volunteer meetings, both in Jefferson Bayou, Louisiana, and in Grand Isle, where we invited all members of the public. We had people from universities and stuff, so that they can, while they're doing their daily activities, while they're walking on the beach, they know who to call. And it's a big help to rely to them because we are located more centrally in Louisiana, and it takes us a little bit of a drive. So we are able to now call on these people and say, hey, we got a report. Can you go check out this carcass? Can you make sure it is a dolphin? Can you make sure it is alive or dead? So that we know exactly what we're going to when we get to the beach and on scene. For next year, I'm really trying to focus in on LSU and Nicholls State University to bring those students into our program as volunteers as well. And then also with the help of Audubon's Coastal Wildlife Network, we're creating new outreach material. One of the big things we did was we designed metal hotline stranding signs that we put up all throughout Grand Isle and Cameron Parish. Everything in red is Grand Isle, and everything blue is in Cameron. It's hard to see, but the Cameron is blue and Grand Isle's red. And then we also created magnets, stickers, flyers, and flyers for both signs. We've been putting them up in grocery stores. We've been putting them in restaurants, public places that we know people will get some eyes on it. For next year, we also want to include a do not feed, no harassment sign. A lot of those signs will go out to marinas and fishing piers. We're also going to create more hotline signs that we can spread out throughout Louisiana. We really want to hit up not just those 2 parishes, but more in the middle and around Lake Pontchartrain on both sides. We're also looking into getting some koozies, float keychains, and we're also looking into getting like a billboard advertisement for as you're entering Grand Isle, or as you're entering Lake Charles area or going further southwest. We're also looking at purchasing some advertisement at local stops. In Grand Isle, Joe Bob's, they have a TV monitor, so we're trying to do an advertisement on that. And then we're also trying to hit up rental agencies at these places where public will come to. There'll be a page in their welcome packet that says, hey, if you come across a marine mammal, dead or alive, this is who you call and this is why we're doing what we're doing. And as I said, for Louisiana, this state sees the most out of habitat cases. This is a list of all our cases. The two main ones, the hurricanes that hit during the start of this program were Laura and Hurricane Ida. So Casper was a male. He was first spotted at 5/14/21 in Pecan Island. The rescue took place a month later, about 6/8/21, and he was released at the Freshwater Bayou boat ramp. That's him in the right-hand corner. For Hurricane Ida, we had Poncho, which was a male. He was found in a small retention pond in Slidell, Louisiana. This one case got a lot of media attention because it was literally found the day after Hurricane Ida, right next to an apartment complex. So a lot of people heard about this. We were able to, even with the hurricane and, everybody was moved around, we still were able to have a rescue take place on 9/5/21. And we released it in Waveland, Mississippi, just to get it out of the hurricane and everybody's cleanup efforts. Hurricane Ida also brought in 4 severely decomposed bottlenose dolphins that were found on the side of the road. It was a strange sighting just to see on a busy road 4 dolphin carcasses, but due to the flooding, we got that call, we got permission to go sample it, and we were able to get samples from all 4 carcasses. And then another one from Hurricane Ida was Dorothy. This was a rare case because she was found in a cow pasture in Cutoff, Louisiana. So it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of people to do this. But she was first reported on 11/10, and the rescue took place on 12/10/21. And then our last case for Hurricane Ida was our mom and calf pair. This took a little longer, but that was because this is a mom and calf. We believe that this calf was born right before Hurricane Ida. So when they were displaced and displaced into this retention pond off of LA1, this calf was just so young, and we didn't want to put any stress on this calf. So we decided to wait. We monitored it for a full year to let this calf get bigger. We kept checking the salinity. We kept looking at food source to make sure that both mom and calf were safe in this pond during this duration. This mom is a known Barataria Bay dolphin, and that was another reason why we just wanted to make sure, because we have so much information on this mom, we want to give her calf the best chance. We first had an attempt on 11/14 of last year, but due to limited boats and weather, we just were unsuccessful. So we said, let's pause, let's give it some more time, and let's do it right before our health assessment when we know a lot of people are coming into this state. So we did that literally the day before the health assessment. We had a successful capture, and we were able to release both mom and calf into Barataria Bay on Wakeside Island. That picture at bottom right hand is mom and calf that we saw them during our health assessments. You can see the satellite tag on mom. Because the calf is so young, we did not tag the calf. Well, we roto-tagged, which is just a punch, but not the satellite tag. Also, part of this project was the Barataria Bay Health Assessment. This is a huge project where we bring a lot of experts from all over the United States into Louisiana to study the Barataria Bay dolphins. This covered from June 19th through the 29th of this year. We encircled 27 dolphins, 2 escaped, and 1 was released due to unhealthy habits of the dolphin. 24 of the 27 received full assessments, and they received VHF tags, so we were able to track them. Out of those 24, 15 were females and 9 were male. 21 of the 24 dolphins were known Barataria Bay stock dolphins from our photo ID catalog. 20 of them received ultrasounds. 15 of them received flipper x-rays, which help us age dolphins. And then 17 of them had AEPs, which are auditory evoked potentials, which helps determine their hearing capability. And then we were able to also disentangle 1 known Barataria Bay dolphin. And this is the gear that was from that disentanglement. He is known as YR6. He was first reported to Audubon's Coastal Wildlife Network on June 11th. He was first spotted during the Barataria Health Assessment on June 19th. We tried to capture him once, but the gear didn't really affect him, and he was able to jump out of our compass. So on our second attempt, we were able to get the compass and get him in hand. We were able to remove all the gear, and that is the picture that you are seeing. As you can see, it's twine, it's fishing line, it's a hook, it's weights. I mean, there was just a lot of stuff on the dorsal fin of this dolphin. We were able to remove all the gear, we were able to give this dolphin antibiotics, and then we released it back into the Barataria Bay. So another component of this project is create trainings and bring in more opportunity for our training partners here in Louisiana. So after the Barataria Health Assessment, we hosted a NIST training at the Audubon Zoo on July 1st. NIST is known as the National Institute of Standard and Technology, and they are also our marine mammal tissue bank, and they're located in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, this training really helped with collection and preservation of tissue for environmental contaminant analysis, and we really were looking at the liver, kidney, and blubber on marine mammals. And like I said, another component is to really do diagnostics. So when we first started this project in 2021, we created a contract with the University of Illinois Zoo Pathological Program. Last year, we were able to send out 36 cases for brucella, only 34 were run, 7 were positive, 26 were negative, and 1 was inconclusive. For morbilli, we sent out 30 cases, 28 were negative, and 2 were inconclusive. And then for biotox, we shipped out 13 cases, 2 were positive and had high values for brevitox. 2 cases were high in dominic acid, and 4 cases were high in oxalic acid. And then we have already shipped out 33 samples for this year, and results are still pending. And then lastly, just some emerging issues for Louisiana. You know, we see effects of climate change on our marine mammal population. We're getting more and we're getting stronger hurricanes, which also brings up the storm surges, and that's what helps, and that's what aids in those out of habitats that we see. We're getting more rain, not so much this year, but freshwater inundations. You know, we're getting decreased salinities in areas throughout Louisiana. We're getting increased threat of harmful algal blooms, and we're seeing new pathogens due to runoffs and changing temperatures. And we're also seeing changes in fishing distribution and fishing activities. And a lot of the stranding data aids in determining the impacts of DWH oil spill on marine animals, and will be critical as we move forward with the Mid-Barataria and Mid-Breton sediment diversion projects. And I'm just going to end it on our hotline. If you see anything, just give this hotline a call, and we just ask that you don't push any animals back into the water.
All right, thank you, Ms. Noble. Appreciate that update. A lot of good information there. Any questions from the board, comments? Mr. Reeves?
I listened to a lot of the discussion of your outreach and whatnot. Are you coordinated or involved with, do you have wildlife and fisheries involved in the education process?
We do, however, LDWF they were one of our stranding partners, but in 2018, they are no more with strandings. So we still use them. We've asked to be, we're using their facility at Grand Isle. They were huge during the Barataria health assessments. So we still use them, but they just wanted to step back from strandings.
I was just thinking that at least as a matter of outreach, anyone with an offshore fishing license, it might be a good audience just for an outreach targeted communication. And the Louisiana wallet, for those of us that have it, I mean, it has, I don't know if that's a communication source, even just send a message to people with those licenses, if that is a group that makes sense to know about it.
No, that would be a great thing.
You done? Yep. All right, thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Cormier?
On the same end, I was thinking the same way about, VRBO and those rental facilities. I saw there was some rental information, I don't know if you specifically had them at beach areas as well to just get, and also the parishes like Cameron Parish Police Jury and partnering with them because they have a lot of people on the beach, grading the beach and stuff as well. So just some ideas about how to outreach and I like the idea of Lake Charles being targeted as well, but just the parish outreach as well.
Yeah, they've been a great help in Cameron and in Grand Isle.
Right.
Those are the ones I've hit up first. I've spoken at many council meetings at both locations. Grand Isle has been a great help. I believe we have the stranding hotline number on tickets and water bills that go out now too. So through those council meetings and stuff, I have been able to get connections that way that have been really beneficial.
Great, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you guys are doing a lot to improve outreach about the network. I saw you have a lot of signage in Grand Isle and some other public beaches. One thing I guess I didn't hear was as far as boat launches outside of those areas, like within the coastal zone.
Yes, that's going to be this year's project, is really hitting up those public beaches, those boat launches. Due to funds and how we get funds, you can only do so much, and so we wanted to do that hotline number in the areas that we're getting the most reports at first. And so we wanted to see how those signs were doing before we ordered a mass supply of them for both Do Not Feed and the hotline. So now that we know we're getting calls from those signs that people see, we are currently in the process of ordering more signs.
And then one other quick question. As far as data or publications produced from your guys' efforts, is there any place public or researchers can go to find that? Are things getting cataloged somewhere?
Yeah, all through NOAA's website, this training.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Noble? Okay, thank you for being here. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 10. Mr. Neil McMillan will give us a federal update. It's been an interesting few weeks. This will be a good presentation.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Board. Happy to be here. Lots to talk about since last talked in August. Kind of avoided a government shutdown. We've had some leadership turnover on the Hill, some WORDA complications and victories, as well as just interesting actions by some Department of Interior and FEMA. So we'll dive in. I guess right after the August board meeting, we found out that there was what I call a crisis with interpretation of WRDA 2022. And as y'all know, WRDA is the Water Resources Development Act that has been happening on a biannual basis that guides Army Corps policy. And the state had worked really hard through WRDA 2020 to get permission to pay back its cost share for the HISDRUS project of approximately $1.124 billion done by September 30th, 2023 in order to waive the construction interest that had accrued. That was in the, I think, $600+ million. And so Louisiana developed a payment plan that this board was very involved in, and we're able to put together 2 cash payments of $400 million apiece, totaling $800 million. But there's also a great desire to realize credit for projects that we've constructed through our Coastal Master Plan that are part of Corps authorized projects and get them, that investment we put there to be shifted over in lieu of cash. And that was going very slow. The Corps had only done something like that once before in California, and Congress was seeing that there was good faith by Louisiana, but that we needed more time to maybe get those agreements negotiated. And so WRDA 2022 passed some revisions to this payment agreement that said that if 2/3 of the balance is paid by September 30th, you can pay the rest by 2032 within the 10-year budget window. We also had a lot more language saying, the type of creditable projects that help wildlife, to help natural resources, that could be done. And so we're viewing that as an excellent opportunity, give us more time to negotiate, to get those through, and really the legislator and folks, everybody wants to not leave credit on the table. But when the Army Corps headquarters legal team was interpreting the WRDA 2022 that passed late December, they were kind of looking at the language not in alignment with the state's payment plan that had been communicated to the Congress and to the Corps. But their fresh eyes were looking at it and they viewed it as sequential. And so that actually, upon their interpretation, meant that this 2/3 calculation that the Hill was using to kind of represent our $800 million in payments, it's about 2/3 of $1.1 billion. That wasn't going to apply to the whole thing we owed. It actually was going to apply to what was left over after our first payment, because the first payment was in statute. And so that next last bit has kind of the math. Instead of $800 million be 2/3, $1.1 billion, which is kind of what we were operating on, the Corps was saying actually it's going to be 2/3 of $724 million, which is, we knew the math is $483 million. And based off the sequence, we paid $400 million, but not the remaining 83. And of course, this was a challenge too, because we've always had kind of some concern about how much we actually owe, because there's a lot of projects still ongoing. But we learned 6 weeks officially before the deadline that we needed $83 million. And when you kind of look around, something like a special session seemed like one possible avenue to get that done, but obviously that would be tremendously difficult. So we needed a solution, and fortunately we did achieve a solution, which I'll get to right there. But also notice, just to show you how, I guess, squishy these numbers were, but also so significant, that when the Corps took a really hard look at their books, they actually realized that we owed $100 million, which is just another, I guess, another zero in there that just was crazy to see. But luckily, we pulled it off a whole day early, and there's tremendous credit goes to the agency and to the Corps that really worked with us. But I especially think of the story, Governor Edwards and Congressman Graves were absolutely essential to making this happen, particularly with the relationships with two people, Director Shalonda Young, He's a Louisiana resident. That's a really important office in the president's sphere. She was very close to the governor, but also to Congressman Graves from some of the negotiations on the debt ceiling bill. And then the Secretary of the Corps, Mike O'Connor, who come down to Louisiana a lot and really knew our coastal story. And so we presented the situation, the governor with his relationships, and Congressman Graves really had an influential first call where he kind of turned the tables from, oh, state, you owe us this cash real quickly, otherwise, welcome back to hundreds of millions of interest, to putting the onus on the Corps to take action, because we started this crediting conversation years ago, but first proposals up in 2021, and we were getting, a solution was for them to not stall if they weren't going to take a step back and reinterpret congressional intent. And the Corps ultimately decided not to override its congressional intent, and when you look at the language, you can see how it was not tight enough to prevent, I guess, an unfavorable interpretation for us. But they did have a path, and Secretary Connor really realized this, that if we're going to accept credit from the state in 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road, that's going to look really bad on us because we didn't get our act together quick enough to prevent this charge. And so with Director Young's pretty constant encouragement, Secretary Connor made a lot of swift action between really in September, and we were able to receive, thanks to delegation authority of Colonel Jones, $69 million in credit for the Whiskey Island project, $40 million for the Caminada Headlands project. Those were part of the Louisiana Coastal Area Program, LCA, that we've done through the Terrebonne Barrier Basin Shoreline Project and the Bear Terrier Basin one as well. So that covered our $100 million deficit. And like I said, we got that sent in writing a day before the deadline. So we are in compliance with the payment requirements and have reduced the remaining balance by another $110 million. There is one catch that we need to be aware on as the board, is that we need to fully secure land rights for the Caminada Headlands project to receive this credit and not backtrack on it. This is really significant. The Corps previously says you have to own the whole project to get any credit. Instead, they were able to give us credit for the parts we currently owned. And so that breakdown, which really required a huge leadership lift, despite as logical as that sounds to us, was huge to getting over the top. And so again, I'll just, our other delegation was involved and informed and asking questions too, but it's, these, relationships, I presented the board last year of, a photo of Secretary Connor meeting with the governor and with CPRA, and it was huge, and it's pretty tremendous to see the Corps act like that, and avoid a pitfall. And without this crisis, many of us have thought that maybe we would never have gotten to this credit, or people would have left CPRA and we might not have had all the information from 10 years ago that was needed. So we're still probably exhaling, but it's a good story at this point.
Neil, if I could interject just a moment. So the point about land rights is important, and I would just note that we have until 2031 to secure those. So we've got some time to work with there. But just in a nutshell, again, this is a complicated issue. There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of parts of statute and WRDA and so forth that if you don't study, it's very confusing and hard to follow. But the bottom line is, in early August, the Corps told us that we owed $83 million on the HISRIS payback. The state of Louisiana owed $83 million. And if we didn't make that payment by September 30th, the construction interest to the tune of about $660 million would also be owed and added to our, ultimately to our payback on HISRIS. So we had two choices at that point in time. We either cut a check for something on the order of $83 million before September 30th, or another option that was in place, thankfully to the foresight and leadership of Congressman Graves, was to secure or seek credit from other projects that were built along our coast. As it turns out, as Neil mentioned, we actually owed $100 million, a little over $100 million, not 83, which highlights sort of the silliness of this whole situation. The Corps told us we owed them a bill. They couldn't tell us what that bill was until the week before it was actually due. And when you're talking about a $100 million bill, it's good to know a little ahead of time, you know, what that actual amount will be. Nonetheless, we were able to work with the Corps to their credit, obviously to the governor's and to Congressman Graves and to Director Young's credit, to receive credit on those other projects to the tune of about $110 million, which means we've met our obligation if we get those land rights by 2031. So all of that is great. It's a good success story. We didn't have to write a check. That's not money that the state can't use for other purposes, including the coastal program in the future, so that's very much a win. The second thing I just wanted to point out is that this is really important because it sets the precedent that this can be done. This is the first time that the Corps of Engineers has done this, to my knowledge, in its history, in the entire country. And so it's important for projects like Southwest Coastal that we just mentioned, for which we have a MOU, crediting MOU in place, where we might implement a project like the Rockefeller Shoreline Protection Project, for example, and then can use that state-invested money as part of our cost share on a large-scale, federal project like that. So it preserves an opportunity for us to receive credit for dollars that we would have spent anyway, and eliminates the need for us to come up with cash to match a project like Southwest Coastal. So, Neil, thanks for giving me an opportunity to interject there. I just wanted to point those things out.
One quick, if I could add, because it's on this.
Yes.
To take a setback and turn it into a step forward is a big, big deal. So thanks to everybody involved. With regards to the land rights, I mean, we have to 2031. But one of the things that we've been pushing on is that having the rights can be just a conservation servitude in perpetuity. It doesn't have to be fee title. The Corps has been insisting on that, and so that's one of the things that we're continuing to work on. And if we got till 2031, I'm hoping that that can be something to change.
They've been insisting on fee title as opposed to servitude?
Yes. Yeah. No, good. Good point. Thank you, Mr. Police.
Thanks for trying to, just reiterate this story that's pretty complicated, so hopefully everybody is able to follow. And where it's leading us is, if we do secure the land rights, there's a path to get 95 million more from the Caminada Headlands project. And then, by my calculation, that means we have until 2032 to get 118 million more credit realized or cash paid. So it's just really moved the ball ahead on this issue. And that was also a great point, Brent, on our Chairman Haas, about the get out of jail policy provision was led by the delegation and Congressman Graves, and so the word helped fix one word helped fix a word problem. Okay, and as that deadline was coming up of September 30th, we were also like, hey, we need to get this done a few days early because the federal government seems like it's going to shut down. And that was kind of the DC consensus going into really the day of September 30th, because the House had struggled to advance appropriations bills. There was resistance to doing a continuing resolution that kind of keeps government funding for a while. But once the House Republicans weren't able to pass something successfully, Speaker McCarthy announced that he would do a short-term continuing resolution, add disaster aid to FEMA, which was really low in their accounts, and folks like in Hawaii were struggling, and keep the government going until November 17th, and use the Thanksgiving holiday as kind of the motivation for the next shutdown situation. And so the Senate passed it well. President Biden signed it, I guess, around 9 p.m. that night, and it was kind of a big surprise when this happened on a Saturday. But as you'll see, there was a big faction of Republicans, 90, who did not like this path, which led us to something that long been forecast, which was called a vote on a motion to vacate the speakership. So McCarthy's kind of had some longtime grudges from folks, and they used this, keep the government open for 48 days while we can continue to negotiate the bigger picture. They used this as opportunity to pounce, led by Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. And so they used kind of a provision that they negotiated in January to hamstring him and to bring up this vote. And I kind of put that quote in the bottom left of McCarthy's this is what he said right after he did the CR. He's like, you have members of the conference who won't vote for perps bills, won't vote for an omnibus, won't vote for a CR. It's the only option to shut down and not pay our troops. He doesn't want to be a part of that team. I don't want to be part of a group that gets things done. Well, they called his bluff, and since there's only a four vote majority for us Republicans, when these 8 folks opposed him, and every House Democrat thought it would be a good idea to not have a speaker as well, and kind of let the Republicans fight it out. We kind of had something that was kind of like a House of Cards script happening in real life, because this is unprecedented and it is tremendously chaotic. It's hard to overstate the chaos that's going on the Hill about this, and so much of it's in the public eye, and it's a very live situation, because right now we are having, I think, a drawn-out second vote on who's next. And okay, good. Well, not good. Interesting. That was expected. Okay, so you gained. See, I was willing to pull up CNN or ABC News Tracker, but they have all these ads, and I just couldn't have the video blare out from the audience. But that's good. Thanks, Mr. Bourgeois, for checking that while I'm presenting.
I'm not saying I wasn't.
That's good. Well, we all were, because Louisiana was unbelievably involved in this, which is just really interesting. Majority Leader Scalise, the number 2 in the conference, was kind of the first nominee chosen. And so he got a slim majority on the first vote, but the conference did not coalesce behind him, because the kind of hardliners, said they weren't going to support him. They wanted someone kind of out of the leadership, kind of a fresh face, and they there's a lot of things going on. And so Majority Leader Scalise, to his credit, didn't push into a deteriorated situation. He kind of pulled back and said, the conference is not here. I want to stay on as majority leader, keep serving the country that way. We need to get a speaker. So I think he had a lot of dignity to that, and so has a lot of support, both now and into the future, probably. And then Congressman Jordan, who is kind of one of the original House Freedom Caucus, so this is one of the more hard-right groups. He's been, very much in the what's called rhino hunting. Rhino is a term for Republican name only. This is what some folks use to say that certain Republicans aren't conservative enough, so he would recommend primarying and running against traditional members to get something more hardcore, if you will. So that's kind of his reputation, and he got the vote on the second ballot, and but he still had a long way to go. And as you see on the first vote, he got 200, which is not the 217 he needs, and I guess he gained a little this past vote, but it's really getting to 98, 97% of the conference behind him is going to be tough for a variety of reasons. A lot of them focused on appropriations and funding, because he's been pro-shutdown in the past, and there's great concerns over ability to fund Ukraine and Israel these days. So right now, a lot of folks are trying to look to the acting speaker, who was kind of McCarthy wrote down as the substitute if he got deposed. Maybe they could empower him for a time. And so, you know, just really a fluid situation, been going on for 15, 16 days, and it's not close to being resolved. Stepping back, kind of what does this mean for Louisiana? Was definitely historic for Majority Leader Scalise to be so close to being a speaker and still maintain his role. Obviously, if he was speaker, bills important to us like the Breeze Act and NFIP reform would have had just an amazing platform. Congressman Graves was extremely close with Speaker McCarthy, so that's disappointing to see. I guess that speakership role change, but it does seem like you know, his stature nationally is really increased, and so that'll be a good thing into the future. Congressman Johnson is actually really generally liked. He's involved in leadership, and he said yesterday that he would be interested in running for speaker if Chairman Jordan falters. So that would be quite interesting if he emerges a dark horse. But, you know, assuming that if Jordan makes it, or if another hardliner makes it a speaker, I think we need to realize that that's a really tough blow to our efforts to pass the RISE Act or Breeze Act, because budgetary reasons are kind of what resulted in this kind of coup, if you will, and so there's a really strong push to decrease the deficit, not spend the extra money, and so having to pay for in the 16 or to $11 billion is just going to be really hard, and so we need to do what we can to shore up our support there, but also in the other tiers of the hill. So focusing on what money we could have coming through GOMESA, I think it's important to look at Department of Interior's 5-year plan, because this will certainly impact the funding that we can get through 2030, really. They've been without a 5-year plan for a while, but they finally released one. As you see from the headline, they are focused on the shift to clean energy, and very pleased to have the fewest lease sales in history. And as you see from this rough timeline I put together, the years are in the green circles. We're going to go from a cadence of 2 lease sales a year to 1 every other year, traditional oil and gas in the Gulf. And that's if all the environmental stuff goes well. And so you'll see that lease revenue, which is a huge part of GOMESA, we're going to have years with no lease bids in there. And wind sales are required to happen after a certain oil and gas lease sale occurs. So you also see a decrease in the pace of wind sales coming as well, which is tough, because I think one of our ideas for the next sale kind of falls oddly in the schedule. But especially with the cap in place, I think this is a blow. But we do expect royalties from the existing GOMESA revenues to continue to increase, and maybe in the later part of this chart that'll make up for it. But we could see some dips in what's available, which is just another. It will be tough for the coastal program. Now, with there being fewer leases, maybe the bidders bid higher, but again, we're capped. But there's also some other provisions that we talked about, like the rice as well, that may dampen interest. So I guess things that we're counting on may be a little disrupted here. Shifting to FEMA, during this, since we presented, there's announced $207 million for 48 Louisiana projects. A lot of diversity, a lot of structure is going to be elevated, at least 532, but really much more. Some were not easy to know the amount. And you just see the coastal coverage of where these awards were, which was pretty comprehensive and good to see. Last week, FEMA announced the next round, FY23, $1.8 billion. $1 billion is to BRIC. There's some directly to the states, some to tribes, but really $700 million for a national competition, and then $800 million to FMA, which really goes directly to structures. They're trying to do $500 million to localized flood risk reduction projects, so kind of spread that out. But there's also a lot of capacity building efforts. Louisiana has two areas that are benefiting from this capacity assistance so far, Ironton and St. John the Baptist Parish. Maybe something other folks want to look into, particularly if you have a Justice 40 covered area. And then there's also this announcement of what's called a Community Disaster Resilient Zone designation. And these are 483 census tracts across the country, which sounds a lot, but when you look at it, there's really not that many, but a few areas that could have a higher federal match based off, I guess, their plight. And I've got some images of where Louisiana fits. You can kind of see, just given the amount of risk we have on our coast, there's not that many census tracts that are in the teal in Louisiana, and we'll have to learn more about kind of how those designations are. You see a lot upriver, but not as much on the coast, at least in the Gulf Coast. But you'll see there's some in near Lake Charles, near Lafayette, in Ascension Parish, one near Houma, and one in Jefferson Parish, and then one in Slidell. And so these areas will have a more advantageous cost share, and so it's probably worth exploring. And thanks for being with me on this long presentation, and look forward to answering questions.
All right, thank you, Neil, appreciate it. Any comments or questions for Neil from the board?
So Neil, who's going to be speaker?
The acting one is McHenry. You know, it's funny how fast the consensus changes, because you think you have momentum and then you realize someone's pretty tough. You know, I would think McCarthy and Scalise are still names to reckon with. You know, and the longer this drags on, will some people that have had high amount of votes be turned back to? But it's really interesting, because I think folks, when they initiated this, they thought we need to figure out our conference, we need to have this fight right now. And then you see the just tragedy in the Middle East, and you realize that this was maybe not the time to do something like that. So hopefully cooler heads prevail, and we can get back to doing that.
Right. Thank you, Neil. Ms. Cormier.
I just think, I want to put it on public record, a shout out to Congressman Graves. We cannot underestimate the power of Congressman Graves being the chairman of this board and having the knowledge and background he had up in Washington to fight for us, to save us those millions of dollars that we need so desperately on the ground. So shout out to Congressman Graves, and please share with your friends that he is a win-win for Louisiana, if for nothing else than just this. So regardless of your political affiliation, the man deserves credit for saving us that very high payment and all the interest that would have come on top of it. Kudos to him. I'll be personally writing him a letter. I think everybody in this room might consider doing the same thing, as well as for Colonel Jones and Director Young, everybody working together to make that happen. So kudos. And Brent, can't wait to see where you are 20 years from now, so that you can be fighting for us up there maybe too.
Thank you, Ms. Cormier. Well said. Maybe except for that last part. Any other comments or questions for Neil? Okay. Thank you, Neil. We'll have, pardon me? We'll have an opportunity for comment at the end of the meeting. Sorry. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 11. We'll hear from Mr. Branson Melanson on marsh maneuvers.
Thank you so much for inviting us to come and speak to you guys today. I spoke with you in March, but it was only my third day on the job. So needless to say, I have a little bit more of a relationship with the program, and I just wanted to talk about some of the updates real quick. We have a couple of new projects that are in the work for the youth wetlands program. We are starting a junior wet contest, which is going to target middle schoolers, which previously youth wetlands have not really targeted. We are looking at a partnership with NRCS for some internships for our youth. Looking at partnering with CPRA, Alexandria Zoo, and East Baton Rouge is going to be starting a environmental science club. Some opportunity outreach that we've had is Breck Wildlife, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries National Hunting and Fishing Day, Coastal Community Day with CPRA. We'll be attending Ocean Commotion, and we hosted some wetland field trips where we got to work with some schools in central Louisiana with some wetland education. And then we have several school field trips. One of the big parts of our program are our formal education efforts, and I'm happy to say that by December we should have a full unit that we're ready to bring to Louisiana Department of Ed. I've spoken to a couple of the people within LDOE, and they are looking forward to what we have for them. We're also looking at modifying our online program, converting some of our legacy lessons to Louisiana student science standards so that it's more accessible to classroom teachers. So I just wanted to kind of get that in real quick so that you guys knew what the foundation was to build young people like Branson and Danny. So they're here to talk to you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Would you mind introducing yourself just for the record,
Oh,
please?
Adrienne Bursajay. I'm the director of the Youth Wetlands Program.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Danny Tito. I'm a senior at Hathaway High School in Jeff Davis Parish. This year, I currently hold a position as a wetland ambassador through 4-H, and I also have attended marsh maneuvers and advanced marsh maneuvers in the years past.
Hi, my name is Branson Malonzo. I'm currently a freshman at LSU under the School of Renewable Natural Resources. I am a 2-year Wetland Ambassador alumni, as well as an attendee of both marsh maneuvers and advanced marsh maneuvers, and currently I'm a student worker with the Youth Wetlands Program. So just kind of a general overview of what Marsh Maneuvers is. It's a coastal education camp designed to target 9th through 12th grade students. The camp takes place over a course of 4 weeks where 4 different groups come in, 16 groups come in, split evenly between boys and girls. What makes Marsh Maneuvers such a unique program is the fact that it takes coastal education, culture, the culture connected with it and the economics connected to it, and it teaches it to youth in a way that they are able to understand and hold their interest. So the amount of knowledge they receive is unbelievable, and I can personally attest to that as well, Danny.
So this program started in 1987, and throughout those years up to now, we've had over 1,900 youth participate. This is around 10 to 15 participants per summer indicate that they want to have a career in environmental, coastal, and policy-related field, including myself. At the beginning at camp, they have a pre-test, and they test on all the material that they'll learn throughout camp. And at the end of the camp, they'll have a post-test. And in 2023, the average increase in scores on the knowledge base pre-test and post-test was 67%.
So moving into the impact, we're both going to share a quick personal experience and something we got out from Marsh Maneuvers. For me, Marsh Maneuvers paired with other programs through the Youth Wetlands Program, I was able to discover what I want to do with my career in education moving out of high school, which is what led me to LSU School of Renewable Natural Resources to hopefully do research one day based around waterfowl as well as habitat restoration. So that was my big impact.
So the program impact on me was I did not realize what I was walking into the first day, and after a couple minutes, just sitting there visiting with people, I learned that there was so much more than what was shown on a piece of paper, or, you know, they could have said something here, but it was a lot more to that, and that program impacted me. And I made so many friends that I still communicate with, that we all have this passion for the wetlands and coastal restoration that we continue on throughout our lives. And to continue this, I plan on going to Nichols State, to pursue a degree in marine biology.
So a general overview of what the campers see on a day-to-day basis is that they would arrive on Mondays and they would leave Friday mornings. From the moment they arrive, they are kept fully engaged at all times, whether that be through lectures or direct activities. The lectures before the activities are designed to help prepare, and lectures after kind of reinforce what they learned. And then the activities give them the hands-on, which what really keeps their interest in it. And it was a fun experience to go through and be able to, you know, get the background, do the actual work, and then kind of reflect and figure out what all happened just moments before.
So when the campers first arrive, we jump right in. We start by learning about Louisiana shrimp, and at the end of the day, we learn how to peel and cook the shrimp that is donated to us by Gulf South Seafood. And then after dinner, we have the campers sit down for their first lesson about coastal wetlands, the threats that they face, and the federal, state, and non-government organizations that are involved in coastal management and restoration.
So for the second day, it is spent mostly at Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge in partnership with Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. While the campers are there, they get to see some active management practices such as ME18, the shoreline breaks along the Rockefeller coast, as well as some of the management structures scattered throughout the marsh. Along with the educational aspects of it, the campers also get to go experience and catch their own crabs, which they then clean and cook to eat that very night. So it's very hands-on in that aspect.
So day 3 starts off with a canoe trip down Coulee Kinney. This is a 2.8 mile long canoe trip. And on this trip, they observe wildlife and learn about the invasive apple snails and destroy the eggs in order to help out the environment. After that, the campers head on to a tour of the Omega protein processing plant to learn about the menhaden and how it's harvested, processed, and packaged. After our tour, the campers learn about the alligator conservation program, the hypoxic zone, and about the Mississippi River watershed through an activity where a scale model of the river and its major tributaries and distributaries are built using candy and goldfish. At the end of the day, campers finish up by learning about otoliths, or the ear stones in fish, and then are taught to dissect their own otoliths from the speckled trout heads.
So on day 4, the campers get to experience one of the major parts and one of the better well-known aspects of marsh movers, and that is the active marsh grass planting. The campers are brought to Bayou Petit Anse, right off of Avery Island, where they get to plant Spartinia alterifera. I probably said that wrong, but anyway. They get to plant it's also known as smooth cordgrass. Every year, Marsh Movers attributes approximately 3 acres of being created in this area. And it's very unique to see because we put out in a boat and we get to go out and you see the stages of all the Marsh Movers before and the grass they had planted. After they do plant the grass, they get a tour of Avery Island and they learn the history and the geology of the area. But after the day at Avery Island, the campers get to go to Shucks, have a nice meal, and they get to learn about the oyster industry through regulations, catch limits, and eventually processing for food production.
So to move on to advanced marsh maneuvers, there are 16 youth that are selected based on active participation, attitude, and their test results pre and post. So the 16 youth that are selected get to go to White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area in December during the duck season split, and they learn about the freshwater and marsh ecology and waterfowl habit management. If the timing and locations are at the same time as these campers are down there, they are able to see the reintroduction of juvenile whooping cranes into Louisiana. At the end of Advanced Marsh Maneuvers, there is an amazing marsh race, and this is a race that consists of series of challenges, one including building a wood duck box that leads the campers who are in pairs racing for first. Personally, being able to attend this camp was amazing for me. I was so excited to get the email that said, "You're going to Advanced Marsh Maneuvers," because that was like everything that I could imagine. And by going to this camp, I took a lot more than I was given. All the information, all the pathways that I could take when I get out of high school, all the friends that I made that will stick with me forever.
So to kind of wrap it up, we want to thank all of the partners that helped make Marsh Maneuvers happen. It would absolutely be impossible without them. They allow access to their facilities, help supply the resources we need to complete our activities, help bring professionals in to talk to the youth involved. So again, we really want to thank everyone who helps out. And I also want to kind of add a note in that Marsh Maneuvers is actually very local to the Abbeville and Vermilion Parish area. Earlier you heard Cooley Kinney, the entrance we put is about half a mile this way. Shucks is about 100 feet that way. So like I said, it's very local, and we want to thank everyone who helps us with it.
I also want to give a thanks to the two Ag Center employees who make this possible, Miss Catherine Fox and Mr. Mark Shirley. They dedicate 4 weeks out of their summer every year in order to take these kids under their wings and give them an experience that changes their life. So thank you to them.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Branson and Danny. Sure appreciate that presentation. It is good to end a long meeting like this with an inspiring message and to see young folks interested in the coast, of course, and in the work that all of us on the board and many of us in the audience are involved in. So really appreciate that. I wanted to give a thanks to Mark as well. I saw him in the audience. You noticed he was in most of the pictures that were presented today, and so related to Marsh Maneuvers. So his contribution doesn't go unnoticed, and it shouldn't go unnoticed. So thank you, Mark. Any comments or questions from members of the board? Ms. Cormier.
I would just like to suggest maybe in the future figuring out maybe some funding to take those 16 students that go through the Marsh Maneuvers and maybe get them somehow to the State of the Coast. That, you know, every 2 years we do the State of the Coast.
Yeah.
To just extend what they've learned, and great presentation. So glad to see you guys here, and thank you for your service in the future to the coast of Louisiana. Wherever you go, you will have that knowledge. But I think it would be good, maybe CRCL, we could find some sponsors or something to get those 16 students, not to let go of just this, but then in combination with maybe the next 2-year track of the State of the Coast, so we can hear from young people about what it is they're going to do to help the coast in the future. So looking to the future, that might be great.
Yeah, excellent idea. That's I know CRCL does offer some scholarships to the conference each year, and so but maybe a more direct tie to Marsh Maneuvers would be a good thing. So thank you for that. Other comments or questions?
Great presentation, and I'm very encouraged for our future. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks again. So we will move into agenda item number 12. We will move into public comment. I have 2 cards. If you wish to make a public comment, if you'd fill out one of these cards, they're available at the table at the front. Ms. Kinchin, who called roll earlier, will collect those from you, and we'll invite you up to speak. So the first speaker is Mr. Doug Daigle, wishes to speak on Gulf Hypoxia Action Plan.
Thanks. Do I need to use the mic?
It'd be helpful to use the mic, and I would remind folks, Doug, if I can just interject before you begin speaking. It's board policy that we do not respond to questions. That said, this is a small group. We're all here, and we'll be here after the meeting is concluded. If you have a question, we're happy to talk with you about that and hopefully give you an answer. So, thank you, Doug.
Thank you. I'm Doug Daigle, the coordinator of the Louisiana Hypoxia Working Group, which is a forum that's met every month since 2003. And the meetings are open to all interested participants. We meet in Zoom format, so I'm always happy to add folks to the list. So I've been speaking for the last several months at CPRA board meetings about the Hypoxia Action Plan. And here in Vermilion Parish, it's worth noting that the Vermilion Parish Police Jury is one of numerous local governments in the state that have expressed support for the action plan and Louisiana's participation in it, along with numerous associations and boards and commissions and organizations and the legislature on numerous occasions. So in terms of the state's participation in this effort, there are two key parts of it. One is the in-state part, and that's largely but not completely under the state nutrient reduction and management strategy. But then there's also the basin-wide or upriver part, because most of the nutrients that fuel the hypoxic zone come from upriver. And so I've spoken previously more about the in-state part, but I think it is worth looking at that upriver part because the action plan is the vehicle to try to address those larger loadings from upstream. And the action plan has never been fully funded in the 20-plus years of its existence, never really been adequately funded, which is not to say that nothing's happened. A lot of things have been done, but success of that effort depends on trying to get more resources. So it's certainly in the state's interest to do that. I've been calling for an assessment of the state's role for a number of reasons because there are some accountability points that are coming up. And so I think it's fair to ask in terms of trying to get the resources for the action plan, what the state has done within the hypoxia task force. I'm not aware of anything for the past 10 years. That partly reflects a problem with the task force because there hasn't been an organized effort on the hypoxia task force to fully fund the action plan for probably about that long. However, the state's passive role there has not helped in helping us try to move forward with that. Now, fortunately, our delegation has stepped up to the plate. They have made attempts. Senator Cassidy has submitted appropriations requests in his respective committees and managed to get the critical provision in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which got money to the states on the task force. That was the first direct funding that they had gotten under the action plan in all that time. And it actually reflects an appropriations request that I coordinated the submission of for the first time in 2010. So that puts it in some perspective. It was a great step forward. Senator Kennedy has done the same thing. Representative Graves got some funding in the EPA budget a couple of years ago, which again was the first direct funding in that particular area. So I think we need to understand where we are in moving forward, that there are improvements that can be made and really need to be made in how we're dealing with this issue. And I know that our delegation will respond to requests they get because they were responding to appropriations requests from constituents, not the state. So it doesn't have to be at that big a level, but it's striking that the state has not attempted to do anything on that front. That's the end of my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Right, thank you, Mr. Daigle. And I have another card here for Mr. Cheryl Segrera. Is he still here? Yep, there he is. No hurry. Mr. Segrera would like to comment on the master plan.
Let's see if I can sit on one, let me get up. No, we were tasked, I serve on, as of now, I serve on a committee, coastal committee with task. We were tasked to put a master plan together basically for the
Would you mind speaking into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some folks that, thank you.
Used to this technology.
You got it.
Yeah, I was tasked to put up, not I was, we were tasked to put together this master plan for the parish on projects that we needed to get done and have some kind of a form of, for the future, whatever. The problem we're having right now is to be able to put everything together and make it all match, we have to put some kind of a levy system. I know the master plan has, I guess you could set an alignment of, on your state master plan for the Million Parish. Now, my concern would be, is that alignment cast in stone? Is that where it has to go? Or can we come up with different, I guess, scenarios for alignments of a levy system? The problem we have in basically is not really a problem, it's just a thing we gotta address is you have the Delcom Canal on the east end, which is in Iberia, but it still has to be addressed. Iberia has already set some kind of a, I don't know if it's a temporary or is a scenario of a levy system, which we're going to have to tie into that levy system. So to be able to put a levy system in the Million Parish, we got to be able to see what is going to be consistent with the master plan. First thing, if this plan you have already is cast in stone, we dead in the water. But if we can put our own, I guess, our own idea where our levy should go, we better put that in the plan to be able to coordinate it with the rest of our projects we plan on doing. So my question would basically be, is that levy alignment permanent thing?
So it's the board's policy not to respond to questions. I will ask Mr. Lazina to get with you immediately following the meeting, though, and I will say the short answer is no, it's not cast in stone. So breaking board policy, I shouldn't do that. That's a bad precedent to set, I recognize. But yeah, Mr. Lazina, please get with Mr. Segrera immediately following the meeting and have that discussion, please. Pardon me?
I'll talk with him as well. Association 11 boards.
Yeah. Mr. Bourgeois will speak with you as well following the meeting. So
Yeah,
I appreciate the comment and the question.
Yeah, we got it. We have the meeting room sitting there. We got to address that problem, because if you can't put a levee on each side of the river and leave the river alone, so it's a push to put some kind of a structure in the river, but we'd like to be able to know that alignment of this levee or this alignment is consistent with what you're going to do on the Million River.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you for your comment. Any other public comments? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion for Ms. Gotro, second for Mr. Lovell. Any objection? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.